Great to be in Fort Valley, Georgia. My co-chair, my wingman is not here today. Rick Jaspers had a last-minute change of plans. He actually has a death in the family, so he has to travel to Tennessee for a funeral. We have some other members that aren't here today as well. Russell McMurray and Pat Wilson and Tricia Pridemore are all participating in the Hyundai event south of here. So there's a big day in South Georgia at the Pooler facility. So we're going to get started and kick this off. We've had a couple of last-minute changes to the agenda. We'll discuss that in a second. I'm looking around the room to see if there's a representative here from the college. Dr. Paul Jones, are you here? I think the president was going to come. We got a vice president here. Would you like to say welcome to your campus? You can come up and take the podium here, or you can just use this mic.
Thank you so much. Good morning. My name is Karen Wright. I'm serving as the interim vice president here at Fort Valley State University. I handle the offices of institutional advancement, and I'm also the executive director of the foundation. We are so pleased to have you on our campus today to study the Committee on Electrification of Transportation. This is a very, very important subject going forward, and we are looking forward to what comes from the study. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for having us here on your beautiful campus. Yes.
You know she's going to be my hero.
How's that?
She sent out for Diet Coke.
We should have sent you out for Diet Coke. Sorry. All right, we're all family here, so we can say that about each other. Most of you in the room know who we are, and we know most of you. But so we're going to jump on into the topic. We do have one change on the agenda that I'll bring up. We're going to add Andy Moore from Bluebird. He will be presenting right after Scott Enos. And then we have changed the presentation from ARTBA. Carolyn Simons will not present today. They will present next week at GDOT in Atlanta. So if all of you don't know, we're meeting next Wednesday, so November 2nd. That will be at the DOT headquarters on the 4th floor, which is called the boardroom, where all the board meetings are held. It's a nice room. It's got a good setup for audio visuals, and it'll be our final meeting before we begin the deliberations on the final report of this committee work. So put that on your calendar. There'll be an agenda sent out later in the week, and it's going to be a long day, so don't plan on getting there early or late and leaving early. We're going to be there pushing through the final stuff that needs to be taken care of. Any comments from the committee members before we start? I see Randy got a little bit of a look on his face. You question or? They are going to present at the podium. It's bad right here. Yeah, it seems to be better over there. So, are y'all hearing us okay? Can you hear me? All right, we're going to move on then. I'm going to sit down. Our first presenter is Scott Enos from Enterprise. Scott, are you in the room? All right, thank you. Good to be here.
You guys hear me all right? Yes, no? Good? Cool. My name is Scott Ennis. I am the Vice President of Finance for Enterprise, Leasing Company of Georgia. Good? There we go. My group operates mainly in the city of Atlanta. So the branch you drove by coming out here today, that is another group that operates in the Macon part of the state. So have about 2,000 employees, and thank you guys for looking into this, Senator and committee members. It's a exciting topic. By my title, I'm not an expert in the EV area, but I did get some notes from our Chief Strategy Officer on what my company is doing in the EV world. So just going to go through a few things and see where we get. So as one of the largest mobility providers and fleet operators, we're embracing transition to electrification. We're committed to doing it in a thoughtful way for the benefit of all of our stakeholders and our customers. EV adoption is still in its early phases. However, market shares and types of EV vehicles being introduced by manufacturers are increasing quickly in many markets. Our strategy will continue to evolve with the broader markets. For example, this past summer, several members of my management team had the opportunity to drive Polestars and test them, charge them, see how they felt in them, give feedback to our company as we look into this EV evolution. When we think about our strategy, it's not simply about introducing a large number of EV vehicles like some of our competitors are doing right now, but it's also taking a look at our approach. Our approach is ensuring our customers have a great experience with us, and our partnership and investment to make this a long-term viability solution for transportation. Customer experience. As a privately owned company, thinking long-term, putting the customer at the center of everything is what we do, and serve our communities in that way. We must ensure a great experience when a customer is in an EV vehicle. Enterprise operates a diverse business, both in the mobility business line we operate and in the customer service business. The diversity of our business presents unique opportunities and challenges to electrify our fleet over the near and long term. A couple examples, business-to-business renters. Strong demand in some of our business lines make them easier to electrify, and early opportunities to bring more EV vehicle solutions to our customers for companies that are used to the EV solution. These businesses can experience a positive return from transitioning to EV due to cost savings from lower fuel and maintenance and overall alignment with companies' sustainability goals. For our daily rental teams and our retail customers, electrification of our rental business is more complex, requiring significant strategic planning, as well as branch modifications to have charging stations in each of our branches. And we have in Atlanta about 150 locations, including the airport. Additionally, rental vehicles has distinct customer usage, driving patterns that we need to take into consideration before we introduce EVs fully into our fleet. As a company, we have several thousand EV vehicles in our global fleet, and we're continuing to add. As I mentioned earlier, this summer we had Polestars delivered to a lot of our management team to test drive those, understand how to charge them, add charging stations at their houses, and get them used to the experience. They shared their feedback with our corporate team to let them know, what the positives and the challenges were for our rental customers. Some of the research that we've done shows customers are hesitant about EV vehicles for three main reasons. One of them being not enough charging stations, range anxiety. I know when I drove my Polestar this summer and I saw my battery life take a quick dip and I was out somewhere, it kind of worried me. And then also too much time to recharge the EV vehicles are challenges that we see in our business. As a broad travel industry, we need to help customers overcome these concerns. We believe we have a unique role to play in this business in an effort to work with key stakeholders through strategic partnerships, helping minimize those barriers for customers and close the gap in the infrastructure. Consumers use rentals at extended test drive, a chance to experience new vehicle and vehicle technology, reinforce the unique role of our business can be played in introducing customers to EV vehicles. Our research shows nearly half of consumers intend to rent vehicles, indicating a test drive is a reason to rent a vehicle to try it before they actually buy a vehicle. Some of the downside that we saw from our little test we did this summer was when the EVs break down. They are hard to get fixed. For example, Polestars, we had to send them to Charlotte, and they did have a significant amount of downtime compared to our normal vehicles. We're continuing to work with cities, states, federal officials, electric utilities, infrastructure providers, and other ways to enhance EV and EV infrastructure, visibility to ensure our customers will have the best possible experience when they rent an EV vehicle. We're part of several committees. We've had equity investments in companies as we see this as an emerging business line that we're moving into. And I think that's all I have for today. Questions?
Thank you, Scott. Couple questions. So as your company starts to adopt these electric vehicles, do you envision most of these charging stations will be at your locations and all your lots? And my question is going to be, currently, if I buy or rent a car or a truck, I bring it back, I have to have it full of gas before I turn it in. How are you going to address that with a battery that's three-fourths discharged? Are you going to charge the customer for an uncharged car when it gets turned back in as well?
To answer the first question, yes. If we're going to add EVs at all of our stores, we would like to have charging stations on site. A lot of our rentals are quick turnaround, so a business customer may rent a vehicle for half a day, and then we get it cleaned up and prepped, and it goes back out to rent. So having the car down for 4, 5, 6 hours to charge is a challenge for us, and taking it to a retail place to have a quick charge is just more expense for us and things that we have to deal with. Currently, we're not recharging for electricity. We just ask the customers to bring it back at what it went out on. Most of our vehicles go out at 80%, I believe is the number, and we just ask them to bring it back. So if they have it for an extended period, they'll be charging it at home with the cord and bring it back as they see fit.
So what are some of the issues you've had with the EVs that you currently have on the road today? What are some typical malfunctions or mechanical problems?
I'm not a mechanic, but I do remember hearing about some battery issues. We had some vehicles that had connectivity issues just in the vehicle. And like I said, for us, it was mainly Polestars, a Volvo product. And I know that we had to ship them to Charlotte. That was the closest facility that could work on those. And you think about Atlanta, nobody there. I do have technicians at our airport who are certified in a lot of different things, and we're getting them up to speed with EV vehicles. But that's still a challenge out there. I don't think there's enough shops to take on those type of repairs right now. So
I'm going to switch gears with you for a minute, then I'll pass the mic. Funding is obviously one of the key issues we're looking at. And when I say funding, I'm talking about the loss of motor fuel tax. Today, when someone rents a pickup truck out of your lot or a BMW, they take off, they drive it, they fill it up with fuel. They're paying 50, 60 cents per gallon motor fuel tax between the federal tax, state, and local taxes. With the electric cars, obviously, there's not a way to replace that yet, so we're trying to figure that out. A lot of your cars that you rent are titled in other states for whatever reason. Georgia currently charges $200 for an electric car tag per year, registration fee. That seems very low for a car that may be rented 3/4 of the year, and you may put 40 or 50,000 miles a year on a car. I'm not sure what your average odometer readings are for your cars, but if you're only paying $200 a year and you're driving 30 or 40,000 miles, then you're obviously saving a lot of money from the fact that you're not paying for fuel or the motor fuel tax. So we're trying to figure out some kind of road usage charge. The question is, how does that work if you're buying a bunch of your fleet cars in other states that are not ever going to be titled in Georgia? How do you feel about this road usage charge if we put some kind of a per mile charge on that for electric cars driven in the state? And how would we collect that from Enterprise or other rental companies?
I don't know the answer to that, but I know that every vehicle that I have in my fleet is registered in the state of Georgia when it lands in Atlanta. Now, those vehicles may cross over state lines and go to different states, and we may receive vehicles outside of our group. That's been something that's changed in the past 10, 15 years with our company. But, you know, of the 30, 40,000 vehicles we have in Atlanta, when we receive them as a new car, they are registered in the state of Georgia.
That would be a good question for research, but my company that I own, we rent cars a lot when we travel, and we've rented in Georgia probably 15 or 20 times in the last 2 years. I've never seen a rental car title from Georgia that we've rented. So I'm not saying that you don't, but we've rented from different companies. I've just never seen Georgia tags on any of the lease cars that we've rented. So
Yeah, my company tries to register proportionally in the states that we operate in. We can't prevent our customers from taking a vehicle from Georgia to Alabama and dropping it over there and vice versa. But, our company's plan is to register proportion in our states. So if I have 30,000 vehicles operating in Georgia, my territory, I need to have 30,000 vehicles registered with the state of Georgia.
So do you try to get that car back eventually? If someone rented a car and drove across the country one way, when do you ever see that car again?
You may not.
All right. Any other questions? Y'all raise your hand. I'll pass the mic. I see no other questions. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate
thank
the
you.
information. Okay, next will be Andy Moore from Bluebird Company. Andy, welcome. And
Now, it looked like y'all were having a hard time hearing the audio. Can y'all hear me all right if I just stand here?
you want to use this cordless?
Were y'all hearing okay?
I think it was just real loud. There was some feedback, but everybody okay with the sound now?
Do I need to plug in? Okay. Yeah, perfect. That'll make it easier. Yep. So how are y'all doing this morning?
Great.
So show of hands, who all has heard of Bluebird? Now keep them up. Who all before today knew that every Bluebird that goes across the country is built right here in Fort Valley? That's good. I like to see that. So again, welcome y'all to Fort Valley, the home of Fort Valley State University and Bluebird. So I'm going to give you a little overview of Bluebird, kind of what we've been doing in alternative fuels and specifically on an EV, and then obviously turn it over to the representatives for any questions that may come up. So where do we start? Well, the answer to that question, like we said, is right here in Fort Valley, Georgia. 95 years ago, we were founded here in Fort Valley by Albert Luce Sr. Since that founding, we have built over 500,000 buses, and nearly 200,000 of those are still on the road today. So that to me just goes to like the quality, the durability of the product that we build right here in Georgia. On a good year, the last couple of years, given COVID and some other factors, volumes have been down, but on a typical year, we can produce 11,000 buses out of our facility just down the road. And again, like I said, those buses go everywhere in North America from coming right out of here. So here's a, no thank you, Siri. So here's kind of a slide I like to show, just kind of showing the progression of our history from our early foundings in 1927, showing Bluebird #1 with Mr. Luce there, all the way up to what we're building today. The vehicles that we build down the road are really those top two lines. It's a Type C and a Type D bus. Our Type A's are from a joint venture we have with a partner out of Drummondville, Quebec. And those are the much smaller capacity, smaller buses. We consider ourselves innovators. Back in 1927, we built the first school bus body using steel rather than all wood. Again, speaking to that durability, we really, Mr. Luce saw that as the way to really keep kids safe, getting them to school, and really kind of making the vehicles last a lot longer than they were seen at the time. Flash forward to 1994, and it was then that we produced our first electric vehicle. Not recently in the last few years, but in 1994 ahead of the Atlanta Olympics. And here's a picture of that beautiful bus from back then. So that begs the question, where are we now and where are we going? So we consider ourselves the alternative fuel experts. I know there's been a lot of focus on EV, and for good reason, but in 2014, we started putting a propane powertrain into our buses. we saw propane as an alternative to diesel that's much cleaner and pollutes much less than the diesel buses that are on the road. Today, less than 50% of the buses we build are now diesel. In an industry where there are 500,000 school buses running around and 95% of those are running on diesel, what we build, only half of that and decreasing is diesel. So looking now, propane, gasoline, CNG, and electric is making up a larger and larger share of the buses we build. We've really focused on clean energy, clean power to really, keep kids healthy as they're riding the bus to school. In 2016, we received a grant from the Department of Energy to kind of restart our electric bus program. From there, we started with that and then launched and started putting the first electric buses on the road in 2018. Since then, we have orders for over 1,200 and have put over 600 electric school buses on the road in 31 states and 4 Canadian provinces. This week, there we go. As you can see, since 2018, the volumes for our electric product has just continued to grow pretty exponentially. We expect that trend to continue, especially with where the bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed, which has a carve-out for clean school buses, and I'll get to that in a minute. But as I was talking about earlier, there are a lot of benefits to electric buses, zero emissions being the big one. There is no tailpipe, so I can't say nothing comes out of the tailpipe because there is none. Completely electric, we can get about 120 miles of range on a bus, which isn't a lot compared to a Tesla or a Polestar, but really, when you look at a school bus duty cycle, about 80% of routes are 70 miles or less. And that's not per route, that's per day. So that's 35 miles in the morning, 35 miles in the afternoon, with an opportunity to charge in the middle of the day. So when we look at electrification of vehicles, school buses really make the ideal use case for electrification. Going through a few other items that you can see, reduced maintenance costs, there's no oil changes, there's no DEF fluid. You actually save on brake jobs because with the way the motor works, you don't have to use the brakes as much. Just a lot of benefits both to student health, to the operators using them, and the maintenance. One of the things that we like to point out is the cost of operating the bus, diesel versus electric. When you can look at some of the power and torque specifications, electric, by and large, well above and beyond what meets and exceeds the performance of a diesel bus. But when you start getting down into fuel costs, that's where you really start making a difference. Now, it's not free. We know electricity has a cost, but when you look at that cost compared to what it costs to run a diesel, you actually are saving pretty significantly. Now, this just factors in the cost of the fuel. That's the diesel you're putting into the bus or the electricity you're using to charge it. This doesn't factor in the maintenance savings. We've done some calculations, and that 22 cents per mile for an electric actually drops down to closer to 14 cents per mile when you factor in the maintenance over the life of the bus. So one of the biggest barriers to acceptance right now with electric buses is the initial upfront cost. They do cost 3 to 4 times that of a diesel bus. However, we're getting pretty close to a point where total cost of ownership over the 10 to 12 year life of a bus, you actually come out better with an electric bus versus what you would have to do with a diesel. And that's just strictly financial savings. That has doesn't take into account the less tangible things like environmental impact, student health, test scores, any of those things that are affected by inhaling the emissions from a diesel powertrain. So I've talked about where we came from, where we are today. Where are we going now? Actually, tomorrow the EPA is going to be announcing the first recipients of the Clean School Bus program in the bipartisan infrastructure law. Now, initially, the EPA said that they were going to, in the first tranche, put up $500 million of the first billion that they were going to spend this year. The response to the application process was so great that they nearly doubled what they were going to give away. It was oversubscribed so much that they felt that they needed to double the amount that they were giving away this year. So tomorrow, again, they'll be announcing the recipients of the first $965 million for electric and propane school buses. Half of the funding was allocated for strictly electric. The other half was allocated for any kind of alternative fuel, whether that's propane, CNG. But the response, again, for the program was that I think 90% or so of the applications were just for electric. So there is a demand there. People are interested in it. They want to start electrifying it. They see the benefit of it. Bluebird helped 35 schools in the state of Georgia apply for this funding. We hired a grant manager full-time to kind of assist through that process, make it easier for the districts to get the funding. That will account for 304 electric or propane buses, depending on how the funding shakes out. And that's just what we helped districts do in the state. Other districts were able to apply on their own if they were comfortable with doing that. Some of our dealers in other states helped to apply for that funding on behalf of school districts across the country. And there were some larger fleet customers that applied on behalf of their customers that could potentially also use that funding to buy Bluebirds. But when it comes to electric adoption, as we know, there's a lot more than just selling the bus. We can't just drop the bus off with the keys and wish them good luck. To help with that and help with the adoption, Bluebird's launched what we're calling Bluebird Energy Services. This is a kind of comprehensive plan to help with the adoption of EV. This goes from everything from beginning with an assessment, is an EV right for you? Right now, with the range, there are some limitations. There are some more rural routes that require longer buses or longer range that we just can't get to at this point, and we understand that. But we want to do a good assessment. We want the customers to have a good experience if they do decide to go through it. I'm not going to go through every item, but really our focus is on making that adoption easier, helping them, can you hear me? Helping them with infrastructure, navigating what the requirements are, the energy requirements, what the power they have on site, what improvements are needed, what kind of chargers they need to power the bus. Again, just helping them make sure that they can do everything that they need, because at the end of the day, in the morning when the driver shows up, they want a full charge, they want that bus to be able to run the route, they want to be able to get kids to school. That's it. If it's easy for them, then it's something that they're interested in. If we do anything that makes their lives more difficult, they're going to stick to what they've been doing for decades. So that's why we've kind of put this together to help that transition. And it goes all the way through end of life. I know there are a lot of questions, well, what happens with the batteries at the end of life? Well, just because the battery is at end of transportation life doesn't mean that it's the end of that battery's life. That battery can be taken out of the bus and used for stationary storage where the requirements on range aren't there. It can be used for battery backup. It can be used for storing renewable power. There are lots of uses that can be used, and they can also be recycled. A full 90% of the material, the raw material in the batteries for some chemistries can be recycled in a circular economy to be put back into new batteries. So there's a lot of advantage and there's a lot of potential for what can happen with the bus at the end of life. So why does this matter? Why does this matter to Georgia? Why does this matter for anyone? Really in Georgia, we are engaged here in Fort Valley in a global economy. We are working with suppliers all across the world to put parts into our buses. We're also leveraging experience with major Fortune 500 companies, Ford, Cummins, and others, bringing that experience here. We're helping to train our workforce with high-skilled jobs that are associated with the EV industry. We're doing all of this right here in Fort Valley, which again, who all has been to Fort Valley before today? Good. I'm glad to see that, but not many people. But we're doing that. We're doing that here in Central Georgia. And as you all know, with the announcements with Rivian, with Hyundai, SK, Georgia is becoming a hub and a national leader in the EV industry. Was it, Seth, 9 years in a row that Georgia was named #1 to do business? And I think that we're just going to continue to keep that up by investing in the future of vehicles and vehicle manufacturing. It's great that engineers that graduate from Georgia Tech, from Georgia, from Mercer University, from all of our state schools don't have to go to Detroit if they're interested in the vehicle industry anymore. They can stay right here at home and keep that talent in the state. As you know, electrification of vehicles is gaining momentum nationwide, and like I talked before, school buses have the ideal duty cycle for this. They can also be used for vehicle to grid and emergency services. So as Georgia is growing our percentage of renewable energy, solar power particularly, in the middle of the day when those panels are generating power and demand is lower, that energy has to go somewhere. Well, in the summer, when buses aren't being routed, you can imagine a fleet of 100 buses sitting out there with all this capacity ready to soak up all that power and then be able to utilize to send back to the grid to stabilize it rather than spinning up another coal generator or something else that we're running. It's a way to help the utilities like Georgia Power and the EMCs, and also to utilize that asset when normally they'd just be sitting idle over the summer. It could also be used as something for emergency response. If a tornado or hurricane comes through, knocks out a grid, they could be plugged in to power microgrids in order to help emergency operations. I know that a lot of emergency operations happen at schools. They use the gymnasiums as staging areas. And I can see a future where you have a line of buses lined up powering that operation while, our heroes at Georgia Power and the EMCs are getting the lines back online, but not having to wait to get those operations up and running. It's all right there. So again, the future is bright. There's a lot of potential, but it will require investment in the infrastructure, as we've talked about. So whether that's charging infrastructure, the V2G infrastructure, there's a lot to do, but we're happy to be, helping lead that charge here in the state and nationwide. So that's all I have. And any questions?
Yeah, a couple questions. First, talk about the cost of an electric bus compared to the gas or diesel. I don't think that was on your slide because I've been told there's a ×3 factor in that.
Yeah,
Is that true?
So that's accurate. Right now, the cost of an electric bus is about 3 to 4 times that of a gas or diesel bus. However, we have been seeing pricing come down, cost of materials come down. We're hopeful and anticipate that with the federal funding that's coming out, we'll go from building a couple hundred buses a year to a couple thousand a year. Just those economies of scale for the material that we need will bring the cost down significantly. I think it will be difficult given just what the history to get to a point where the acquisition cost is on par between those two powertrains. But what we do like to focus on is the total cost of ownership for a school bus, the life of the vehicle. 10 years, 12 years, which is about a typical life of a school bus. Over that time, you'll come out better with an electric vehicle rather than a diesel.
And what is the range of an electric bus miles per day?
Right now, we're seeing between 100 and 120 miles. But again, we are looking at as technology is moving quickly and advancing, batteries are becoming more energy dense, so you're able to package more capacity in the same amount of space. So we have already got programs in place to move on to the next generation of batteries, which will increase range from that 100, 120 to 150, 170 miles.
So switching gears to the current situation with fuel, most counties in Georgia have different scenarios. Some school systems still have a centralized fueling system where all buses come back to a central location or a regional location to get fuel. Some counties, like the one I live in, the bus drivers have a purchasing card. They can go to any gas station or service station in the community and get diesel or gasoline for their bus. And then they drive the buses home after their afternoon trip. They take their kids home, and the bus drivers take the buses home. The next morning at 6 a.m., they fire them up and they drive again. How do you envision those buses being charged since their bus drivers aren't going to have a charging station at their home? I'm assuming they'll have to come back into some regional charging facility somewhere.
Yeah, so again, the situation you described where drivers actually take the bus home, that one is difficult. There's not a great solution there. You could install charging infrastructure at a house. It would be a lower level 2 type charger, which can charge the bus probably in 8 to 12 hours. Not great, well, that's from zero. So if there is any residual charge, it may not take that long. But right now, we're focused on the fleets that do centralize that fueling, centralize their fleets. So when I talked about the Bluebird Energy Services, we're there to help districts that have a central location lay out their infrastructure, lay out how they do that at their sites. Again, there are a lot of things, in those edge cases that we are going to have to figure out what to do. But again, our buses are able to charge both level 2 and level 3, or like the DC fast charging. So you can charge a bus from 0 in about 2.5 hours, which again, if a driver is just going somewhere to plug up, they're not going to sit around for 2 hours, so that may not be the case. But again, you're not looking at 12, 24 hours to charge a bus from 0.
So if it's a range of 100 to 120 miles per charge, there's a good possibility that every bus will have to be charged every day.
Yes, that's
and
accurate.
so do you have, like in a small county, maybe there's 50 to 100 buses, you would have 50 to 100 buses that would have to come to a charging facility somewhere every day, and there would have to be it seems like that would be an enormous investment to build that infrastructure, would it not?
Yes, it can certainly be a big investment when you start getting that.
And then bigger counties, you may have 400 or 500 buses, so it'd be a big expense.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Question from Alan Powell. Here's your mic.
Currently, what is when y'all manufacture a gas or diesel powered bus today, what's the average cost of those to the school systems that buy them?
So maybe $110,000, $120,000.
And what will be the price of a electric bus?
We're looking $350,000 to $400,000 right now. So it is. We recognize that is a barrier to entry, which is why most of the adoption has been driven by grant funding right now. But again, as we see this funding come out, economies of scale and technology improve, costs will come down.
I noticed that you had made a mention a couple of times about being dependent on federal money. I think the term you used, it was given money. Is this for R&D, or is this for actual manufacturing cost, or is this subsidizing y'all's cost to manufacture these, or what?
So the federal funding that was approved and is going to be announced tomorrow is strictly for the customers, school districts to acquire buses. So that money does not come directly to us for R&D or manufacturing. That goes to school districts for them to purchase vehicles.
Cheese to bait the trap, so to say.
Sure.
All right. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Brad, you want to grab that mic down there? Yeah. Then we'll come back down here next.
Hello, test.
Pass that.
With last name Thomas, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to ask a question. So, pretty much, I'm just curious. What's the typical weight of a battery pack for one of those buses? Do you know?
So our battery packs right now are about 3,200 pounds. But again, as they get more energy dense and reduce in size, we're going to see that number decrease. But even then, because of the gross vehicle weight of our buses, we're only seeing a reduction in capacity by a few students. So rather than being a 78 passenger vehicle, it may be a 76 or a 72 passenger vehicle.
That was where I was going. Thank you.
Excuse me. To expand on Chairman Powell's question about the tax dollar return that the EPD is planning on doing to focus on clean school buses, you were saying that the primary purpose of this or these funds are to give the customer the opportunity to acquire the buses. Do all of the customers, I think you said 32 school districts that Bluebird's been able to assist in applying for this funding, are all 32 of those districts, do they currently have an infrastructure that would support the charging and operation and maintenance of these buses?
So in the state right now, there's only one electric bus operating, which is in Fulton County. Of the 32 that we helped apply, I don't believe any of them have infrastructure in place. However, there is funding. If they do receive the grants from the EPA, there is funding built into that specifically called out for infrastructure. So it's on a per bus basis. They get a certain amount per bus for the vehicle purchase and a certain amount for the infrastructure funding as well.
So have these districts, do they wait until the funding is given before they start RFPing the construction and building of infrastructure?
I believe so. This is a brand new program, so we haven't really had a lot of experience, but I believe they're waiting to see if they receive the funding before they undertake any of those capital projects.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No one? All right. Well, Andy, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Very
thank
good
you.
information. We look forward to seeing you this afternoon. Okay, next we will have a presentation from Enviro Spark. Center for International Trade and Security, University of Georgia, Dr. David Gaddy. He's a senior fellow, battery life cycle and grid security. Dr. Gaddy, welcome.
Yeah, just tap that right there. Perfect, and then just
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Gooch. I appreciate y'all having me here today. It's good to be in Fort Valley. To the previous question as to who's been to Fort Valley, I used to pick peaches down here in the summertime a long time ago. Can you hear me, Frank? You're good. There we go. It was an important thing, that point. I used to pick peaches down here in the summertime. It was hot work in the 80s back then. But it's always good to be back in Fort Valley, born and raised right up the road here in Macon. So, Senator Gooch, I appreciate y'all letting me come and speak to the committee today. It's probably one of the bigger issues that I've seen our state be up against, at least in probably the last 15 or 20 years. And what I want to talk about, the Bluebird presentation was kind of down at the technology. I'm going to move back upstream. What we do at the University of Georgia and my group, it's a small research group at the university, we look at energy policy and energy security, and we look at it very differently than a lot of other academic institutions do. We are focused on security and reliability. So I'm going to come at this from a power generation and energy resources perspective. I'm going to look at the state of Georgia, but I'm also going to give you some context as far as what some other states' positions are and why the state of Georgia is actually uniquely positioned to rise up to this challenge, because this is going to be a challenge to the grid. Bottom line up front, 2 bullets here. We are going to face some resource and grid challenges. We're going to have some supply chain challenges, and I know that the committee has already had some conversations. I've gone back and listened to the hearings that y'all have held before, and y'all have looked at the supply chain challenges that we're going to be facing. But we're also going to be up against some top-down federal, national energy and climate policies that are going to impact our state. I think we're positioned, though, given our state's vertically integrated regulated market structure, and we do in the state of Georgia, and I travel all over the country talking about energy policy in the electric power sector. We are blessed to have pragmatic, realistic policymakers in this state that are looking at this as an economic opportunity, not necessarily driven by carbon reduction, but driven by it as an economic opportunity for the state. So I'm going to come at it from that perspective, and of course, if you've got any questions as I move through this, do stop me. This is where we are in the state. This is our electric power sector as we stand. You can see since 1990, since then we have always, every time the state came across an energy resource, we have always increased our resource diversity and our technology diversity. Right now the state is looking, you can see our coal is declining, our natural gas is increasing. We have in the loss or in the retirement of our coal plants, we're replacing that, backfilling it with natural gas. One point that I want to bring up, for those that are familiar with the power sector, the loss of that coal plant is a loss of a baseload resource. That is a 24/7, pretty much running all the time resource. We're backfilling that with natural gas. We're bringing in solar. Notice here our residential rates for 2021, 12.6 cents average. The U.S. average is about 13.7. Again, I'm moving this towards, in the future, what are we doing with regard to our resource diversity and our technology diversity for the power sector? In a year or so, we're going to bring Vogtle 3 and 4 online. That's going to really be a boost for the coal baseload capacity that we're going to continue to probably lose over the years. But we're going to be able to backfill that with two 2,200 megawatt units at Vogtle. That's going to be a very important asset as we move forward, particularly as we bring EVs online and demand increases. Georgia's residential rates, and again, my point here is to just give some context to what we are as a state in our power sector and things that I am recommending to the committee that we keep in mind as we move forward, again, driven oftentimes by at the national level by carbon reduction. We're also looking at this as ensuring that we maintain reliability and keeping our rates affordable. If we look at the regulated markets in the U.S., the black dash line there is the U.S. rate since 2001. This is residential. The red dash line's kind of hidden there. It's the state of Georgia. We are consistently below the U.S. rates. This is something, of course, as we move forward in the EV market that we want to maintain. If we look at Georgia compared with deregulated markets, and again, this is a strength here in the U.S., in Georgia, our regulated market structure, we are well below most of the deregulated markets as far as our average retail residential rate goes there. You can see right there the red dotted line, again, lower than most every other deregulated state. This is kind of the central slide that I hope to maybe draw some attention to. A little bit busy. This is kind of what people like I sit around do when he doesn't have anything else to do. He draws cartoons just trying to convey the importance and perhaps some things that we need to consider as we move forward. So as we look there at that Georgia's electric power sector right now, as you see up there at the top, our coal capacity is going down. Natural gas is up for now. Large nuclear is up, and we're bringing solar PV on, utility and distributed. But keep in mind, there are going to be pressures down the road as far as facing carbon constraints and what a future, lower carbon future looks like, both in Georgia and in the U.S. So that is going to necessarily, perhaps, draw in additional solar PV. And you see there with that solar PV, it's also going to include batteries. Now, those batteries there, I'm talking about are batteries to firm up the solar PV capacity. That's going to push us towards a dependency on minerals and metals, the supply chain, and as I pointed out in the previous talk, it's a global supply chain. If we bring, and when we bring EVs and batteries online, the only point I want to highlight is there is an emerging circle of dependency there. That cycle of dependency where not only our power sector is becoming more dependent on a global supply chain of minerals and metals, but also our transportation sector. And I know the committee has seen these presentations before. I know that you're aware of this. I want to highlight how important it is as we plan and look forward, particularly 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the road, that we are not only looking at our energy resources and looking at charging stations and where we're going to place those, but we're also looking at how we're going to plan out this sort of dependency on minerals and metals. And I'll get to some slides here in just a minute that we currently don't have a domestic supply chain to support. You'll notice I've got a blue ellipse there, small modulars. I'm not going to really go into that. This is something that we look at in our research that we think is going to be critical as we move down the road. These are small modular nuclear reactors that are much, much, much smaller, 100, 200 megawatts and even smaller, that can be placed around the state grid to provide some decentralized power generation. Serves as base load. It's also zero carbon, very reliable and very secure. If we look at EV sales, this is worldwide, and this is from the International Energy Agency. You'll see the color scheme here. China is always red. And from 2010 up to last year in 2021, EV sales have pretty much been dominated by China. That does not necessarily mean they are driven in China, but they are sold out of China. If we look at the lithium-ion battery capacity, again, this is something that China has been way ahead of the curve on as far as pretty much cornering the global market here on lithium-ion battery capacity, and that's all the minerals and metals that go with it as well. The U.S. is trying to make up ground, but we have got a lot of ground to make up in this space, particularly as we talk about transitioning not only some power generation capacity to renewables and battery backup, but also our transportation sector as well. As far as the EV battery supply chain, and this is looking at the entire supply chain, mining to material processing, cell components, battery cells, and the EV cells, again, you see how China has dominated the market from pretty much from mine mouth to the sales floor. I've got the U.S. circled there. I actually had to highlight them in white just so I could show us up there where it is. It was actually kind of a green color that we couldn't see. But we're just not in that supply chain right now. It is not me recommending that we not move towards EVs. It is just simply something we have to take into account, seriously take into account. And also for the solar PV, it's the same thing with regard to China dominating that market. And again, I bring this up because our power sector is also in Georgia adopting more and more solar, which is a good resource. It's a good technology. We need more and more of it as much as we can reliably. But again, China there is a dominant supplier in that supply chain. This is a busy slide, and it's, again, these are the kinds of things I often present to my students. I do not want you to read this, and I'm not going to read it. It is only to point out here that the key to our reliability, standing up something like an EV future here in Georgia, is going to be diversity in our resource base, because resource diversity is technology diversity. I want to draw your attention just quickly, if I could, for a few slides, 2 or 3 slides, to that far right-hand column there where I've got annual capacity factor underlined. I'm going to show you 3 slides of 3 resources, but annual capacity factor is essentially just this. It is the percentage of 8,760 hours in a year, the percentage of time that that resource and technology is actually generating electricity, percentage out of 100. So if we look at, for example, utility scale solar, and this is in the U.S., not specific to Georgia, over the course from January to December of 2021, you see there the capacity factor is about 24.6%, which means that 75.4% of the time, solar is not generating electricity. It's not a negative or a positive, it's just a reality. The sun goes down, we have weather, but the capacity factor there is critical because we are going to need to ensure that we have a diverse resource base. So you can see for each month, the capacity factor varies. And as you would expect in June, the capacity factor for solar is higher, June, May, June, and July, than it is on the shoulders of the year. If we look at the resource that Georgia is trending towards, which is natural gas, that capacity factor bumps up to about 54.4%. Within 10 or 15 years, that's going to be in the 70s as more and more states turn to natural gas to backfill the coal capacity that's being retired all across the country. Very important point here, just keep in mind natural gas is a flow resource. It has to get to you. Coal is something that can be stored at the plant site. So the very difference as far as reliability and security goes. Natural gas again, and we can look back to the Colonial Pipeline issues last year, it's got to get to you before you can use it. It's a great resource and a great technology, but it comes with its limitations, and that is there can be supply issues out of state that will impact our capacity here in the state.
Dr. Getty,
Yes, sir.
hold on one second. We got
Senator
a question.
Gooch.
Got a question from Senator Ginn.
Can you flip back to that complicated slide?
Say it again, Senator.
Flip back to that last slide.
This one?
No, one more back.
That one.
There you go. I noticed you didn't put anything about biofuels in that, or where they fall into it as far as your,
So here, Senator, I'm only talking about power generation resources, not necessarily transportation resources.
biomass
Biomass.
fuel.
Yeah.
And I noticed if you went back another one, they were like 4.5% of your,
Yeah.
but you don't list them here. I was
Because a
kinda
lot of
curious
that, a lot of that is industry. It's an industrial power generation. It's cogen. A lot of that is. It's not necessarily from Georgia Power or the MEAGs or Oglethorpe Power. A lot of that is at industrial sites. To your point, you're right. It is one of those, but it's not going to be one of those growing resources in the state necessarily. These are the ones primarily that I listed here, the ones that are growing right now or declining.
I know Chairman Powell has 2 of those plants in his area.
Yeah. I think I'm going to dodge that.
Go ahead, continue. Thank
yeah,
you.
that sounds like a inter-party issue right there. So then, again, here's the nuclear, and again, it's the one that runs pretty much 93% of the time. It's got a very, very high capacity factor. Again, the point here is to bring up, as we have a diverse resource generation portfolio, they all have positives, they each have negatives, high carbon, low carbon, high capacity factor, high reliability, low reliability. And the state of Georgia is arguably one of the most diverse power generation technology states in the country. And I'll get
Question on that.
Yes, sir.
Back
Yes, sir.
up. Why is it at 82% in April, not 99.9%?
So, Senator, across the country, and usually in the spring or the fall is when we're going to go through refueling. So that's when the reactor is going to come down for refueling and the capacity factor is going to drop accordingly. And again, these are for across the country. Fair answer? Did I answer your question? So to put Georgia in a perspective compared with our competing states, the top 8 GDPs, again, to just look at how Georgia is well positioned to deal with this, but also, again, the challenges that we're up against. Right now, across the country, nuclear plants are actually being retired. This is a busy table that I keep a running total of. We've retired 11 reactors since 2013. Actually, the 2 red lines there include a couple more. The only thing I want to point out here is that the highlighted blue down there in the bottom section, they were scheduled for retirement, but states had to step in because if they had shut the plants down, they were not going to be able to keep the grid operable. I'm only pointing this out to show you or to illustrate to the committee here that states are going in different directions as far as energy resource policy making. Each of these states that you see highlighted here in blue, every single one of those is in a deregulated market, each of them. Now, if we go state by state, and I'll rapid fire through these again just to show some of the contrast between Georgia. Here's Florida, a regulated market, and it's the only other one besides Georgia. Notice how much natural gas dependency they have in Florida. It's about 74% right now. Florida's economy, its power sector, is highly dependent on a single resource that comes to the state in a pipe. And I've spent plenty of time in Florida. This is a grave concern down there. They're very concerned about this over-dependency on a single resource. If you look at New York, and again, I'll start looking at the residential rates here that I've got highlighted in blue. New York recently shut down a nuclear plant there. I had highlighted there in Indian Point 2 there in about 2019. They backfilled that with gas. Again, New York is one of the states that's pushing for carbon reduction, but their deregulated market pretty much shut down one of their plants. They backfilled with natural gas, and you can imagine that the carbon emissions have gone up. Also, New York's residential rates are 19.4 cents per kilowatt hour. Georgia's, again, a little over 12. Illinois, another one of those states who is dealing with nuclear plants being shut down. Recently, you see there a downtick in nuclear. They responded there with an uptick in coal. They're on the far right in 2020 and 21. If we look at Pennsylvania, also a state that has shut down a nuclear reactor, they too have backfilled that with natural gas. I bring this up again because nuclear is one of those highly reliable resources, zero carbon, and when you shut one of those down, you're going to have to backfill it with something. Generally, that's going to be natural gas, which is a carbon emitter, and also not as reliable as nuclear. Ohio, tacking into natural gas also as they shut down coal plants. Again, keep in mind, Georgia, closing down coal plants, leaning more heavily towards gas, but also bringing online nuclear power. Texas, right now, Texas is pretty much one of the examples in the country, perhaps for what not to do with your power sector, as they have backed off of coal. They have backed off a little bit of natural gas, but notice how much dependency they have now on wind. Their reserve margins are very, very different than they are here in the state of Georgia. And the last one is California, which we could talk about California for some time, but a few things here that I want to point out. California is driving their energy policy around carbon reduction. You'll notice that their residential rates, 22.85 cents per kilowatt hour, are the highest in the country. And I only bring this up because Georgia has, from Governor Kemp, I've heard this over and over, and I've heard this from the committee, Georgia is looking at this as an economic development issue. It is the right thing to do. It's the right approach to take because we get in the position where if we're chasing carbon reduction and carbon reduction only, we are going to run into reliability issues. Also note here that California, I've got at the bottom of that table, they import 30% of their electricity consumption from out of state. So our rates, residential rates, compared with those states, and again, we are competing now for EV production and market share. Our rates compared to those states are well below those. We only got a couple of states with rates lower, but you can see here again how much lower we are than our competitors. And then if we look at the carbon emission side of this, which is also important, very important, our power sector emissions on a GDP basis, that is metric tons of carbon per dollar of GDP, we are that red dashed line. We're below the average. The only two states that beat us are New York and California. And you can see there I've got their rates highlighted at 22 and 19 cents a kilowatt hour. Georgia has kept the grid reliable, rates low, and our resource base is very diverse. Again, it positions us to be in a good position to support this market. And my last graph here is just simply looking at our power sector emissions on a per capita basis. Since 1990, we have gone from 10.47 metric tons per person to 3.7. And again, a reflection of sound policy, good policy making. And I'll close with these last two slides. We are the only state in the country that is actually offsetting coal with both or all three, natural gas, nuclear, and renewables, while reducing carbon and prioritizing and maintaining reliability. So this is my last slide, and I'm going to step away. Our opportunities and challenges in the state of Georgia, I think that top line that I've got here, it's reliability focused. It's an economic development opportunity with carbon reduction benefits. That is, it's not the other way around. Our Public Service Commission, power companies, EMCs, MEAGs, our vertically integrated market structure, you see it there. We are maintaining diversity while prioritizing reliability. So to the Commission, I only want to say that we've done a good job in the state getting ourselves in a position to do this pragmatically, but again, as an economic development opportunity, and I think we're in good shape to do that. I cannot necessarily talk about EV charging stations. That is a whole nother thing here. And clearly I am in between y'all and lunch, so I'm going to stop there. And
we'll have some questions, I'm sure.
Yes, sir. And
talk a little bit about the hypotheticals. If 3 million electric cars showed up tomorrow in Georgia and there's no more gasoline engines on the road, how would these trend lines change? Supply and demand curves obviously drives the cost up. So how does that
So the
look?
demand curve is one of the really bigger issues that we're going to deal with. Our peak has shifted. We've got peaks now in the wintertime. That's not what it used to be. So we got peaks in the winter. Managing that peak is going to require, it's going to require the utilities having the capacity to manage when chargers are charging. You can't turn all chargers on at 5 o'clock when you get home. Just can't do it. Not everybody can plug their charger in. There's going to have to be some sort of demand management. And so Senator Gooch, to that point, if we did it overnight, well, the grid would just collapse. The grid's not prepared for an overnight insurgence of EVs, which is why this is going to be something that we're, of course, what y'all are looking at. Sure. How do you manage the peak demand to keep the demand from having to up those resources beyond what we really need? That is, we really don't want the peak demand because that's what we pay for. That's what drives cost, is what your demand base is. So it's going to be a management structure that we don't have in place right now.
So how do you meet that demand? Do you build more plants, more power plants?
No, sir. I think on controlling the demand, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have a management system that does not allow, that only allows certain charging to take place at a certain time. So if we all come home at 5 or 6 o'clock, we can't all plug our chargers in at 5 or 6 o'clock. So there's going to be some management scheme for determining who charges and when they charge and what time they charge, because not everybody in the state can plug in at 5 or 6 o'clock. So this is a whole nother demand management part of what we're doing that goes even beyond what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is trying to make sure we have a diverse enough resource base that we can actually respond to that. Because I think if we're given enough lead time, that the resource base, if we have it, we can manage the peaks. But it's going to be as to who, the question kind of there is who's going to manage it? Is it going to be the individual or is it going to be the utility?
So this isn't a trick question, but what if Vogel 3 and 4 did not get off the ground and it was not coming to fruition today? What would we be looking at then?
A really hard problem. Really hard problem. Without that base load capacity, which is what the coal plants provided for us, without that base load, we would be like most of the other states that I just put up there. And
so we're in a pretty good place right now, competitively.
Senator, we're in the best position of any state in this country right now.
Gotcha.
This is not, though, to minimize the challenges of what we're up against.
Right.
But as far as our resource base and the way the PSC and the vertically integrated market and the utilities work, we're in the best position of any state in the country.
Great.
But we've got some challenges.
Good. All right, we got questions from Senator Lucas and then Representative Parsons.
Since you've been studying this issue, I've got one that concerns safety. If you have a malfunction, all right. What about the safety issue? If there's a malfunction in one of these EVs, how do you put it out?
As far as an EV malfunctioning,
Yeah, and it catch a fire. Do you let it burn, or is there a way to put it out?
Senator, I'll have to yield to somebody from the EV sector, but my guess is get out really fast.
All right, yeah.
I don't know if I would treat that any differently than a regular car that caught fire.
Well, a regular car, gasoline, diesel. When you're talking about battery, you're talking about acid and everything else. So
Yes.
the question I have, how do you put it out?
I'm sure they make chemicals in fire extinguishers designed just for that.
I wanted to ask you, in regards to security.
Yes, sir.
You had mentioned that coal is the most secure because you have it. You actually have like a share. You have vast quantities of coal that's there. But I wanted to ask you about, and this is nothing against, from my perspective, nothing against solar. But from a security perspective, it would seem to me that solar is like the least secure. I mean, it just seems like, by the very nature of it, it's just an extremely unsecure, is that a word, insecure, source of energy. Vast, I mean, I've seen some of these. I got one down in Bainbridge. I couldn't believe how large that is down there that Southern Company or one of their subsidiaries had. You know, it just seemed very, like, it wouldn't take much to put that whole thing out. So, and since you deal with this related to security, I'm just wondering, what do you think about that? That's my question.
Yes, sir. So just to square it up, I see it as there are two issues, reliability and security. The reliability aspects when I talked about coal are that it's more reliable because you can store the resource there on site. You can't store the solar resource, you can store the electricity. So reliability, clearly coal is more reliable than solar. The security part of it, to your point, Representative Parsons, is to me the global supply chain part of getting the solar panels, getting the batteries manufactured. I'm only distinguishing between power generation reliability, and in this case, in your case, the security part to me is a global supply chain. Can we manufacture the panels and manufacture the batteries? But the reliability, to your point, yes, sir. And I love looking at it that way, and I could talk for hours on just that, the national security. And again, that gets to the supply chain issues. As we become more dependent on renewables, we are becoming more dependent on a global supply chain that currently we don't control or have a corner on. Yes, sir. Did that answer your question?
Representative Thomas,
Yes, sir.
thank you for this. This was actually extremely informative. I really appreciate it. And my background is analytical, so I like the graphs.
Your background's in what?
I'm an engineer, so I appreciate
well,
the.
You should have given the talk.
Oh, I got all kind of questions for you, but we won't torture everybody in here. Regardless, so I actually, believe it or not, yesterday on my way down, made a stop at Plant and Share, and toured Plant Share. I was a little disappointed to see that out of 4 boilers, they only had 1 online at the moment. And I guess what my question for you is we talk about this increase, right, and the increase in carbon emissions, and what's the difference in carbon emissions between a coal plant and a natural gas? Because at the end of the day, if it's a hydrocarbon, it's going to make carbon dioxide, right? And that's kind of what the big driver here is. Am I correct?
Yeah, you are.
So if we're taking a coal plant, but we're now replacing that energy with natural gas, we're still emitting carbon dioxide. Why has the coal plant got such a negative connotation to it where the clean natural gas doesn't, if it's still carbon dioxide?
Natural gas, in fact, the carbon emissions that we have reduced over the past 15, 20 years has been because we've shifted from coal. Natural gas is about half the carbon emissions of coal per kilowatt hour of output. So it's 50, we get a 50% reduction from shifting from coal to gas.
Okay, so my next question, and I don't know that everything that you put on your slides is U.S. Bounded, here in the U.S. Do you look anything? Have you looked at international? Because my understanding is we ship a lot of our coal over to China, and they burn them in coal plants over there. Is that correct?
Not as much as we used to. I don't know the right legal term, Representative Thomas.
I'm not
but
a
right
lawyer,
now,
so
we
that's cool.
cannot ship coal out of the state of Washington right now. So those Midwest states up there that mine and produce coal cannot ship it west out of the country, so they're having to move it. So that has cut down on a lot of our coal exports right now. I think, but to your point, China does. We do sell or export some to China. It's gone down a pretty good bit over the years because China's getting a lot of theirs now from Indonesia and India. And, well, not Australia. They cut Australia off during COVID.
Okay. All right, but thank you.
Alan, you're next.
Thank you, Doctor. Senator Robertson, and I'm a public safety engineer. Since that's the important word. You briefly touched on the SMRs when you first started talking, and I know that the certification process on small mobile reactors right now are in the infantile stage, but I know there's been some progress, and the information behind it kind of pushes out a lot of the fear that came from places like 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl and all these other very antiquated systems. And my question to you is, do you see a climate, no pun intended, in the state of Georgia where that could be a possible supplement to the portfolio of energy that we create in this state to go along with solar and some of the other more nouveau type energy sources that we're pushing into?
So, Senator, did you say a declinement? I missed the word.
The right climate. Do we contain the right climate here in Georgia that would support those types of industries if individuals wanted to come in and put SMRs in the state?
Yes, sir. In fact, we, again, having talked with 40 other states about these things, Georgia's climate for nuclear, that is as far as accepting, is much better than it is in most states. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with some of our military presence here in the state. We are a very proud, military-oriented state. And I think just that part of it has inclined us more towards accepting nuclear. I think to that point, it is another leverage point for the state. Those small modulars, and you can write this down, that I said this or predicted, are going to be deployed in the U.S. over the course of the next 20, 25 years. They're going to be here, and Georgia is one of the better states, particularly with our market structure here, for actually moving into that space. Not the Vogel large, but small modulars from 60 megawatts up to 300.
And right now, I know there are some just that aren't much larger than some swimming pools that are currently waiting for certification in western states, not
Yes.
California, but some of the western states out there. And doing the research on it, it seems like that would be a quick, safe fix to fill some of the gaps we have. And you mentioned something about solar earlier. I just want to clarify. Can solar energy be stored?
So my point there is that the resource can't. The electricity it generates is, but I'm only making the distinction between the solar resource and coal. Coal is storable. Solar electricity is what's stored in the batteries for firming
Right.
up.
When you say solar, you're talking about the source. You're not
Yes, sir.
talking about
Yes,
the
sir.
energy created.
That's right.
Because that energy created can be stored,
Yes, sir.
right?
That's how we are going to charge these batteries.
Exactly.
Yes, sir.
And something else, your chart showed where you referenced China as being our dependency on the metals and the minerals is going to be on whoever holds those resources today. And with our abandonment of all those resources in Afghanistan, and with China's forward thinking in garnering as much control over those resources, and then when legislation coming out of Washington that requires us to produce products here in America, if you will, with the typical American-made logo, haven't we basically allowed ourselves to be painted in a corner when it comes to these types of resources where we're unable to provide these American-made minerals and metals?
We have painted ourselves into a corner. Can I comment about the modular nuclear? I'll be quick, I promise. We do have two. There's a Natrium reactor in Wyoming. There's a NuScale reactor. We are going to have to come down, Senator, the cost curve on these things, and it's one of the things Georgia's always been good at is not get on the bleeding edge, but get on the pragmatic edge. So we need to come down that cost curve.
I think that's all the questions I see up here. Dr. Gaddy, thank you so much for your information. Very informative. We may want to talk to you offline during lunch if you're going to be around for a little bit. I see no other questions. We are going to break for lunch. Just a second. I'm going to ask Representative Corbett to ask some invocation. I'm sorry? Yeah, hold on one second. So once we break for lunch, everybody can eat here. We have food on the other end of the room. There should be enough for everyone. There's 100 boxes, so don't anybody get two. If you need to go to the restroom, wash up, what have you, go through these doors behind us, and then come back in, and we'll break for about 30 minutes, and we're going to start back because we want to try to get done here earlier today and get moving. So, Patty, Representative Bentley, you have a question or a comment? Sure.
Thank you all so much for bringing this study committee meeting to my district here on the beautiful campus of the Fort Valley State University. And Calvin Smyron, Representative Calvin Smyron, the Dean of the House, and his sentiments as well. He got in late from New York and wasn't able to be here. Hope that you all have an enjoyable visit here at Fort Valley State University. Look forward to getting your goat milk soap next year.
Thank you. Representative Smyrie was texting me. He said he's going to give everyone a free weekend on the, is it Dominican Republic or, yeah. So I thought he was going to say Fort Valley, but he said, let's just go to the DR instead. So, all right, Representative Corbett.
Y'all bow with me. The Lord, again, we just come before you. Lord, just we can humble Jesus know how. Lord, just thank you for this beautiful day you've allowed us to see. Lord, just thank you for the ones in this room. Lord, just ask you just lead, guide, direct us, and everything we do be pleasing in thy sight. Lord, just pray now, Jesus, just bless this food to nourish my body, thus of thy service, and all things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Y'all. My watch, it's 12:30. We want to resume our meeting and finish up as quickly as possible. Our first speaker up after lunch will be from Enviro Quick, and it'll be Stephanie, is it Luke? Is that right? LeQuay, I'm sorry, LeQuay. Thank you. Nice to see that. Are you going up? Yep, go ahead.
Test check.
While we're waiting, I want to thank the staff that's here today from the Georgia General Assembly. I see most of them in the back row back there. Thank y'all for all your hard work, and of course the Georgia Transportation Alliance and the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, and for all of the sponsors who sponsored lunch. I do not see the list in front of me yet, but we want to thank y'all for that great lunch as well. So with that, Stephanie, would you like to begin?
You guys hear me? That's good?
Yes.
Good?
Yep.
Acoustics? All right. Good afternoon. Thanks for having us. I'm Aaron LeQuay. This is Stephanie LeQuay. We're the founders of EnviroSpark Energy Solutions. We're a leading turnkey provider of all things EV infrastructure. So a lot of the questions that were asked earlier, maybe around the charging side of things, maybe we might be able to be helpful. Really excited to be a resource, to get engaged in the conversation, and be helpful in tackling some of these challenges that we face as a state with regards to electrification.
And as Aaron mentioned, we're grateful to be here with you guys, and we appreciate you all taking the time to really spend time diving into all of these issues throughout past committee sessions and today as well. So thank you for being good stewards with this opportunity.
So just a little bit more on EnviroSpark, just quick background. We're a mission-driven organization, so founded in 2014, but our primary objective was always to promote EV adoption by making charging more accessible. So the idea that with more stations out there visible, more people would see them and be more comfortable with the idea of buying an electric car. That's really one of the, as we all probably know, that's one of the main barriers to adoption, is simply access to charging. So that's the problem that we set out to solve as an organization, and it's been our mission ever since.
And we've worked with multiple partners in the industry. We've worked with some of the biggest names. Tesla is one of our clients, ChargePoint. We worked with all of these providers and hardware clients. And we've recently just added a new partner, and that's the federal government. So we just secured our first federal contract. It's a $500 million allocation for the Southeast alone for electrification of the federal fleet across sites here in the Southeast.
Yeah, just to add a little bit to that, yeah, we're based out of Georgia, but and this is really exciting for us because we are a Georgia-grown organization. So Stephanie and I actually met at Georgia Tech doing our undergrad studies. Stephanie actually went and got her master's in public policy at Georgia Tech. I got an MBA at Georgia, so she doesn't really count it. We're still working on it. I'll convince her it's a real degree at some point. Yeah, so to date, we've been responsible for the design, provision, and construction of more than 5,800 EV charging installations in North America. What's really exciting about this conversation today is that Georgia's always been a primary objective for us. So 2,600 of the nearly 6,000 stations that we've been involved with the installation process are right here in Georgia. And that kind of goes with our connection to the state, our Georgia roots, and our desire in founding the company to make Georgia a beacon for electrification. And so it's been, as the years have gone by and adoption has increased, and now it's kind of looking like electric cars are going to take over at some point. The fact that we've gotten to play a meaningful role in that, and in our home state, most especially, is just highly rewarding. So very excited to kind of talk and be helpful. Go ahead.
Perfect. Sorry. And as Aaron mentioned, working with these big names, Georgia is also special to us because we just launched our own network. So we have our EnviroSpark hardware and software solutions. And you can find us with some very prestigious partners. We're proud to have Georgia Aquarium and the Symphony Orchestra as resources that have trusted us to handle their chargers.
So, all right, so on to the fun stuff. So that's the background on us. We've given you a little bit about what we do, who we are, where we're from. What I thought would be really helpful, because we've been to a lot of these sessions now, and we've gotten to hear from a lot of different stakeholders, people that have a vested interest in this aligned desire to see electrification be done right in the state of Georgia. We've gotten to hear from those different stakeholders, but we've heard from them somewhat in isolation. You'll hear from a hardware manufacturer, software manufacturer, or the utility. And what we thought might be helpful would be to kind of walk you through the process of what it actually takes to, from start to finish, from the initial seed of an idea, maybe we can put some charging stations in somewhere, to the light coming on, the magic happening, the stations are now charging vehicles, and beyond. And so what that will allow us to do is basically talk about kind of the different, you'll recognize the different stakeholders that have maybe come up and talked about different things in the various sessions that we've had. But now you'll see kind of where they fit in the overall architecture of an EV charging project. And we've had this unique opportunity to kind of sit at the intersection of all these different steps. We are involved, and our employees are involved in every single one of these steps, and that allows us to engage with all the different stakeholders and provide another perspective on some of the challenges related to that, and also just kind of where they fit in the process. So the first thing that typically happens with any kind of charging project that you're looking at doing, you usually have an interested party. It's somebody who's thinking about putting stations at their property, right? They're open to the idea. And there's a lot of things that kind of have to happen up front in order to design a project that's going to be effective. The stations are going to be used, enjoyed. It's going to be done, if there's an incentive program or taxpayer dollars involved, that you're doing it in a way that is fiscally responsible with taxpayer dollars. There's a lot of questions that have to be asked up front. And you need to kind of get the right people involved and ask the right questions in order to really kind of make the most of an opportunity to put stations in. And what's really interesting in having done this, thousands of times and working with the largest electric vehicle manufacturers in the country and the largest utilities, all the way down to a lot of the rural EMCs, small local and municipal governments, and everyone in between, small businesses and large chains, is that all the needs are a bit nuanced from customer to customer. And so there's but it's a lot of the same questions, and we've provided kind of some of those questions or some of the nuance up there that you really want to get in front of, because if you kind of don't ask these questions up front or have these conversations, you can end up building a system that's not going to be the most effective use of taxpayer dollars. It may not be the most enjoyable or effective for the people that would actually be using it, the end users, the drivers, so on and so forth. So this is a pretty important step, and it allows you to kind of lay the groundwork for what's going to come next, which is the on-site visit.
And just a quick note here, since these stations will be driving business, revenue, and tourism to these sites, specifically with NEVI program, it's important to ensure that Georgia's economic development goals are aligned with how these sites are selected, that we're asking the right questions, are we leaving our small businesses out? Maybe there's an opportunity here to make sure that those site hosts are included and we're not leaving them out.
So some people would think, you've had this preliminary conversation, and kind of in that conversation, there's a couple different stakeholders. So just to back up a bit, you've got your site host, obviously. You have EnviroSpark or someone like EnviroSpark that's maybe helping consult that has an idea of the different hardware and software solutions that are out there. You have your hardware and software providers also kind of in the mix. Once you've kind of settled on answering a lot of those questions, so you've brought in the right people, you've answered the questions that need to be answered, kind of conceptually what you want to do. And also, the other thing is just taking into account if there is a program that's going to help fund it, making sure that you know what the requirements of that program are, so that you take those into account when you get to this next stage. The next stage is the actual physical process of going out to a location and identifying the site conditions to figure out how you're going to actually build this, because it's so important to actually physically go out to a location. We've seen it time and time again where if you try to go straight to the design process without actually looking at the conditions at the location where the charging stations are going to be installed, making sure you have access to power, making sure there's enough power, making sure you understand the route that's going to be taken, any environmental considerations. Without going out and putting eyes on it, you're just kind of setting yourself up for trying to design something in a way that it's not going to end up being able to be built. It might be less efficient than it could have been done, or sometimes it might just be completely untenable the way that you tried to design it. And so we just think it's so important to get out to the location and put eyes on it and really have a good understanding. This brings in the site host. It allows them to have an even more kind of physical, concrete picture of what the project is going to look like, where everyone can agree on where the stations are going to go. Sometimes it's a good thing to, especially something like kind of larger electrical requirements like a NEVI project, to bring in potentially a utility partner if possible, because the more you can find out up front before you go into the design phase, the more likely it is that your design is going to be solid and that it's not going to either cause unnecessary delays or costs.
And just a quick policy consideration here is, I know we're well aware of the NEVI minimum requirements of every 50 miles or 1 mile off the interstate, and that being 4 plugs, but there is opportunity to consider, especially along hurricane evacuation routes, perhaps exceeding those minimum requirements, so we're getting ahead of that. And also taking into consideration what had been pointed out with potential supply chain issues. So planning now, so we're not maybe trying to add things on later down the road when you're dealing with a competition among other states trying to get Buy America compliant charging stations.
And so one thing that I forgot to mention, but I thought it might be worth noting, it was during kind of the Bluebird discussion, was just kind of the question around what would it take to, would that be a big to-do to put in charging stations, to support the bus fleet. I thought that was interesting because you could basically, follow these steps and you could kind of get to a solution that would work. It's kind of the tried and true, methodology that seems to work for building and getting a site to completion. So you could go through that same process. You could have that discussion. How many buses are we talking? How quickly do we want them to be able to charge? How much are they driving? That happens in the consultation stage. And then you go out, you do your site design, you see where the buses are going to be housed. You bring in potentially a utility partner to see if there's going to be additional power required. But frankly, building a project like that to support a fleet like that would be probably easier than doing like a NEVI fast charging project. It's level 2 charging. It's going to be slower. You just have to make sure that the buses are full when you get there in the morning. And so you bring in someone that can kind of do those calculations and make that assessment. And the good news is that's actually a lot less expensive to implement most of the time than kind of a high-powered fast charging application. So wanted to mention that. So now kind of fast forwarding again to the design and engineering phase, assuming that you've gone through, you've identified the needs of the site, you've been out to the site, you know what the conditions are there. The next step is to actually put something down in a concrete way that any general electrical contractor could look at it and say, we could build this site. And so that's typically done by an electrical engineer, and that is predicated on having all the right information in the previous 2 steps. We have kind of the luxury of doing all of this with our own employees in-house, so it's a little bit different for us, but each one of these steps could be done by different parties. So this could be done by an electrical engineer that's a different firm than an electrician. But sometimes having the simplicity of having someone that is doing all stages of the process can be beneficial and create efficiencies, and also just one point of contact. So kind of moving on, if you haven't already engaged the utility, now is going to be the time, probably before you go into permitting, just to make sure that your design is going to work the way that you think it is. They're going to be able to bring the power in the way you want it. But I think what we really want to use the time here to talk about is going to be the permitting process, because it's counterintuitive, or you wouldn't think this is the case, but what we found over the last 8 years is the single most important factor in how long it takes for one of these projects to get done. An EV charging installation from I want to build a charger all the way to the stations being installed. The longest part of the process can typically be the permitting piece, which it's interesting because you would think, well, you're building something. Surely it takes longer to build something than for someone to look at a piece of paper. I mean, it's more nuanced than that, but that's the way that it would appear, when you first think about it. So, but it's a bit counterintuitive. So, and I think there's challenges for that, especially someone like us. This is our sole specialization. Like EnviroSpark only does electric vehicle charging infrastructure build-outs. And we serve all over the country. We work with all these different jurisdictions. And it's hard for us to standardize our design process or our submittal process when every authority that has jurisdiction is looking at things a different way and having different requirements. I know for a while there were certain jurisdictions, I have a master electrician's license. I'd be able to go and pull a permit for a project and you could pull it with your electrical license. Then you run into jurisdictions where somebody says, well, you're pouring a little concrete pad. You're actually a general contractor. That's civil work. You have to be a general contractor in order to pull this permit to be able to do this work. And so it creates additional inefficiencies because now I have to find a general contractor to pull the permit for my little concrete pad or whatever it is. And so it's things like that that just kind of create inefficiencies in a process that if we want to try to streamline this or we want to try to get these projects done in an efficient way or a quick way so that we can see that economic benefit and that we can be effective with our taxpayer dollars. Like it's important, or at least I think it's important to consider the possibility of maybe standardizing some of these requirements and what licenses are required to be held in order to pull your permits. Because I had to go learn every single trade. I had to go learn carpentry. I had to learn roofing, framework, all the ADA code to build a residential house just to get the general contracting license to pull a permit to pour a concrete pad. So things like that, I think, but I'm not salty at all, I promise. It's no big deal. I'm not mad about it. So. And
here we can note that I do believe that somebody asked a question from the committee last session about permitting policy, and I don't think you all got a really strong answer. So we just took a courtesy to include this on the back of that panel, and it's just policy that was implemented in another state where there were requirements and then also guidance, best practice guidance, to help expedite the permitting process throughout this disjointed system that happens at the municipal level. So, again, online portal versus an electrician having to drive 4 hours because the permitting office only accepts paper applications. So things like that, there are some quick fixes and there's some a little bit more, nuanced, but there are definitely some suggestions here as we're considering legislation and policy.
And that may help the building industry as a whole. I mean, just kind of having online permitting in general, I think could be highly effective for eliminating waste and inefficiency in that process. So that could be applied even beyond just kind of the work that we do. And so once you get this approval, and again, it can take a couple of weeks. We've had some that have taken a year to get approved. But once you get past that permitting process, and I'll tell one more story about permits. I promised the last one, but it's just. I mean, I used to joke, but it's basically true. I think, I turned in a design for one jurisdiction. So you don't want to go too far the other way. I turned in a design on the back of like an Applebee's napkin, and they accepted it. And so I don't think you need to go that far in that direction in terms of streamlining, but I think there's a healthy balance where everybody understands the expectations. So fast forwarding to construction. This is now, we're finally at the point, so we've done all these steps. It's not like you can just go out and build a site. You have to complete these other steps first, but now we're at the point where we can actually start construction. The key kind of stakeholders here are going to be the contractors, EnviroSpark or someone like us, a general electrical contractor that's doing the build. Obviously, the site host, you want to minimize your disruption to that site. If traffic control is going to be required, there's a lot of different considerations that go into the construction process where you're digging your trenches and you're running your wire and your conduit. And safety is the other big component with this. I mean, I think just this type of work, it's a new type of installation. Having someone that's experienced in it or at least trained in kind of the nuance of this type of work, which fortunately, I think, Stephanie, you were going to talk about some of the programs, and I know it's already in the NEVI guidelines as well, but something around the safety
component?
Certainly, yes. The EVITP requirement, which is a training program, it's quite rigorous, and there's been some feedback from the industry about it. And I know our electricians have gone through it, and they can attest that it's rigorous, but we actually feel like it's a good thing. Because when you're talking about high-level voltage, you have safety issues, fire issues, and not just the installers, but for any consumer using it, any driver using it, they have to be done safely, and they have to be done well. So after going through this process, we actually feel like it's a pretty rigorous process, and we think it's a helpful tool here.
Yeah, and so all that flows backwards too. I mean, in the initial kind of site evaluation, you're finding out, is it going to be a big deal to disrupt going back to maybe the Bluebird example, if that's just a parking lot and there's no other activity going on there where the buses are being housed, you're probably not as worried about potential issues with people passing by or any kind of safety concerns, or just disrupting normal operations at a location. However, if you're doing it in front of a Target or something like that, or a big mall, then there's different safety considerations. You have a lot of pedestrians, average consumers, and you may have foot and vehicular traffic, pedestrian traffic. So all those different things kind of play into how that construction is going to be done, but it all starts at the beginning. The last piece that I think just is probably worth touching on is the long-term maintenance and operations. So, and kind of the key stakeholders here are going to be your site host. They're always going to be a stakeholder, but also your the drivers, the end user, the person who's actually plugging in their car, has a very vested interest in making sure that these stations are actually working so that they can plug in and use them. And so we've seen this. So we've helped with major initiatives that paid to have stations installed. It's interesting to see what happens when somebody gets a free charging station, that station goes bad, but then it didn't include any kind of a maintenance component to it. And the guy who got it for free is like, well, I don't want to pay to fix it. I got it for free. Why don't you pay? And they're like, no, we already paid for it. And so it just sits there. And then you have the guy who actually needs to use it pulls up, and he's mad because he can't use it. And so maintenance is a very important component to the overall charging process. So just kind of keeping that in mind. I know it is included. I think it is included in it. You're the NEVI expert, but I think it's included in there. We're familiar that there is that 5-year requirement that maintenance packages be rolled into this. It's just so an important consideration here. Is that going to be tacked on with the installer, or is that something that maybe that'll be a separate sort of statewide package? So there's some questions around that. Obviously, it'll be onto the DOT as they are walking through this RFP process and how they want to design that. But just an interesting note as we move forward with this process. And so I have a few other notes, but I didn't know. I'd love to open it up to questions. Want to make sure that if anyone has any specific questions.
Questions? You have a question? Hold on one second. Your fire questions.
How do you put it out?
All right, so I will answer your question. I will say, being involved, and we're installing more stations every day, and close to 6,000 to date. I've never heard of a fire. We've never had an issue like that with a vehicle catching on fire. I mean, obviously, the charging equipment, the vehicles themselves, everything goes through rigorous testing and those kind of things. If it did happen, unfortunately, because I have no experience with it and it's never happened in the 8 years of doing this, that I would be able to speak to an experience to answer. To answer the question.
Well, it's a battery, so it has acid in it. I've had them to eat out the battery tray in my car.
Well, and again, I'm not the technical expert on the batteries, but I can say there is a difference between like lead acid batteries and lithium ion. However, whether or not one is more combustible or flammable than another or easier to put out, I unfortunately wouldn't be able to speak to, just from a lack of having seen that scenario.
So my question is more along the lines of the maintenance side of it, and specifically the metering function. What do you do to guarantee that your meter is reading correctly for the power that you sell, especially over a longer period of time?
That's a good question, and frankly a difficult question, because not even every charging station is metered. So going back to the preliminary consultation piece, you know, you may have, and the Bluebird example, they may just say, look, we want to be able to pull a bus up, plug it in, and you know, we'll just look at the meter on the actual Georgia Power meter, and we'll know how much power was used, right? But then you do have kind of like we have hardware and software applications. That's a good question, because right now it is just we test it. You know, you test it before it goes in. You make sure the meter is functioning correctly, and you install it. The only way beyond that to kind of start being able to tell would be to do some sort of regular maintenance or testing, or also just kind of lining it up against maybe the Georgia Power data from their meter in aggregate versus the independent chargers.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, if I may, I think that was pretty much my question, but regarding the, I'm looking here on this next last page about where places you put these in, where y'all have made the installation. And my question was, I didn't know if these were places where they actually, you know, resold it, or this was complimentary to their guests or whatever. That was my question. But is there any kind of standardized rate per minute or hour or anything, or how does that work as far as the rate that people pay to
It brings
charge?
up an important policy discussion that I think maybe has been opened before, but I don't know if you want to speak.
Well, for your
speak to it,
specific
yeah.
question about how they're charged, or you mean for the consumer, like what they're paying per hour? Some of them are free, some of these are amenities. So what he's referring to is just a handout we included, which were just 5 small businesses we reached out to last week. They are our customers that we did these installations years ago. Reached out, hey, how are the stations treating you? Have you guys seen anything, any positive impacts? You know, we had a discussion with these businesses, and we were blown away by the positive feedback. We're seeing foot traffic, and some of these are free. Some of these are just amenities, just as something for the guests to come, or just to drive traffic in. And some of them may charge per hour. I think one of the hotels does. So it's a mix, and that's sort of the beauty about us being able to offer a custom solution, is that we don't try to push somebody towards one direction.
Yeah.
And that's getting into our business model, but you know, we see positives with both types of applications.
It is the job, or I would argue it is the job of us or someone like us to kind of go over the pros and cons of charging versus making it a free amenity versus maybe them owning it versus maybe someone like us owning it. Our goal as an organization, because of our mission, is to just make charging accessible. We want to offer a lot of different ways that people can do an EV charging project. So there's great examples. So like in the hospitality arena, you have these hotels, and they don't care about making money on the power, right? They're not trying to make, you know, $2 on somebody charging it. They're trying to get that guy staying at the hotel who's paying $250 a night or $300, and he's staying there. And I can speak anecdotally about this as an electric car driver. Like, I won't stay at a hotel that doesn't have a charger. And so they'll offer it as a free amenity, and they don't charge for the actual charging. But conversely, you may have a lot of the government entities that we work with, especially cities and counties, things like that, they may want to charge just enough to make it a cost neutral, so they're not giving it away to their constituents or visitors, residents, patrons, whatever. But they're not giving it away, but they're also not making money. They're not in the business of making. They're trying to serve their constituents, and so they offer it as they charge, but they don't do it as a revenue model.
If I may just, I think 2 more questions really, but first, so when you all install these and put them in, do you offer a maintenance plan on them? Because I understand that's one of the problems that people are running into, is that they plan to charge someplace, and I mean, a lot of times, I don't know what percentage it is, but a lot of times that they don't work. So is there do you all, I mean, is that how it normally works? A maintenance plan is offered with these installations?
Not only is it offered, but it's highly encouraged for that exact reason. And it's interesting, the viewpoints have changed over the years. I mean, over the last 8 years, we've seen this kind of, as people have seen the kind of backlash about charging stations not being operational, and, you know, going somewhere to expecting to be able to charge up and then having a station not function, now you're kind of trapped. People are starting to see the value of those maintenance plans, so we're actually engaging in a lot more meaningful way with our clients to help roll those out because they're actually open to the idea now.
Okay, and if I may, just one more, and it's a little bit probably off the wall, but my background's in telecommunications, a little bit, quite a bit different, but in the latter part of my career, I mean, they're still doing it, but in the latter part of my career, I was involved in a lot of remote installations, huts and vaults and things like that. And here again, it's a different industry, but with those, we put in a mechanism so that if there were failures, that there was some kind of notification back to somebody that there is a failure here and you need to get somebody to repair it. I'm just wondering, I don't know if that's technology.
It's a great question.
I'm sure it could be done, but that's my question. Do you do
and so
it?
that's one of those considerations that comes up in that preliminary consultation, is do you want us to be able to proactively know if the station is not working? Again, highly recommended. You can lead a horse to water, but highly recommended that you do these kinds of things because if not, the first time you find out the station's not working, and so we had an example, I mean, just recently, maybe the city of Naples, Florida, right? Like we installed a bunch of chargers. They didn't want anything special, fancy. There's no communication whatsoever. We have no way of knowing if those go down until we get the angry call from the constituent saying, hey, I need to charge my car and it's not working. Why does the city not fix their, so it's definitely in the interest of a lot of parties, especially if you're trying to draw traffic. You just don't want the kind of negative attention of not having stations or not having a mechanism to proactively know. And then even beyond that, knowing is half the battle, but then getting someone mobilized quickly to go fix it is the other piece. I mean, we a lot of times our response time's 24 hours, but with our maintenance plans, it's kind of 48 max. So we need to have somebody out there the moment somebody calls. We need to get someone out. A lot of times you can troubleshoot over the phone. So the first thing we'll do is try to remote in, see if we can fix it. But then if you can't, the other thing that's funny is it's just like any other electronic, I guess, is you tell somebody at the site to unplug it, turn it off, and then turn it back on, and it starts working again. But 9 times out of 10, one of those two things will work. We can either remote in, troubleshoot, reboot something, or we can have them flip the breaker off, flip it on, and the station starts working, functioning correctly again. But for that other 1 out of 10, and they're pretty rare too. I mean, these stations are pretty robust. They're like a glorified, wall outlet, right? Like how often does a wall outlet go bad? I mean, I guess there is the possibility of maybe user error getting run over, but at the end of the day, I mean, they're basically just a mechanism to push power from the grid all the way to either a device, that device being an electric car.
Question over here. So you're putting these out all over the country, if I heard you correctly.
Yes.
Every state is working on the same thing we're working on today, and that is figure out how do we implement them, how do we collect some kind of road usage fee. You have people putting them in their homes, in their businesses, for fleets, public transit buses, and now we've got all this federal money being sent down to build them basically on the interstate routes. How flexible are the manufacturing companies going to be if Georgia adopts a fee to where we're charging per kilowatt versus other states that may not have a fee at all? Are these companies that are building these units, are they flexible in being able to adapt to each state's laws on those issues?
Are you, just to clarify, are you talking about the charging at the station? So someone goes up to use a station and they have to pay a per kilowatt fee to use that station?
That point of sale type situation, or a person who has a car in their garage, they can't drive on Georgia roads for free.
Yep.
Right now they are. They're paying the $200, which some will argue is too much.
Right.
But we believe that it was done at the time. It was a fair average based on some guesstimate of how many miles traveled. But we know that commercial fleets are going to drive a lot more than personal cars. So we think some kind of road usage charge may be the best approach. But how do you approach that? How do you collect it? How do you assess that price to out-of-state travelers? All the different scenarios we've been talking about. So
Yep.
Is that something that you think the companies would be flexible in if we went a certain direction?
No, it's a fantastic question, and frankly, like it is it's a really difficult one. I mean, what I can say is that what we would do is support whatever mechanism ends up being. So there's a lot of different ways that people have approached trying to tackle that. I think the flat fee was good with low adoption, but you're right, it does charge, the retired senior citizen that drives, 1,000 miles a year, the same fee as somebody who is a road warrior and drives, 50,000 miles a year. It's the same. And so figuring out a way to be more equitable with that is an important challenge. And what we're here to do is to be able to facilitate that. So if there's something where it would require, if you're charging at a station level or something like that, or there's some sort of reporting, or it could be done instead of through us, like, it could be done in some sort of conjunctive partnership with an OEM or something like that, right? Like the vehicle manufacturers, or not taking an odometer reading. I mean, there's a lot of ways that can be done, and if it does require someone like us who's involved in the software side and the charging hardware and charging experience side, we're happy to help work with whatever authorities to pilot or facilitate that type of potential solution. But I do, and maybe it happens at a utility level too. So there's a lot of different ways it can be approached, and I think, the utilities also are just going to kind of play a big kind of role in maybe how that's all tracked or regulated. If you're trying to do it from the actual power, like the actual kilowatt hours that are being.
So I've never owned an electric car, obviously, but are you pulling up to these charging stations, the ones you have to pay, do you have to put a credit card in like you would a vending machine? Does it accept cash, or how does that transaction take place?
It's a good question. So what's interesting, in most cases, it's somewhat app-based. I mean, the user experience is different based on, and these are all considerations you talk about. So if you're talking to somebody about, hey, we're going to maybe put charging stations on your property, here's the different ways we can do it. Here's the different ways they can operate. Maybe somebody does want a credit card reader. We would have to specify the hardware that would have that credit card reader on it to be able to enable that desire. Of course, you also want to make sure that they don't just want it just because it's what they want, that it actually serves some practical function. Sure. But a lot of times it's either more app-based, or even sometimes it can be done internally within the vehicle to where you just set up an account online. Like, for example, Tesla, if you're using their network, all you do is just plug your Tesla car into a Tesla charger and it starts billing your Tesla account. There's no transaction other than that happening automatically. Some of the other networks are kind of going that direction. It's something everybody is working on, is trying to standardize that.
Question on the Tesla, does it read the odometer when you plug it in?
That would be a question for Tesla. I'm not sure. I
But
would
it
assume
could.
that it could,
Yeah, it
and
could.
it may.
Okay.
But they always read the odometer, and that's why they're always connected to their vehicles.
Interesting.
They always have that data. I can log into an app on my phone and see what my odometer reading is
Gotcha.
at any time.
Okay. Representative?
It might be worth mentioning, Senator, that it is a NEVI requirement that they have to be able to swipe. So it's trying to get
Is that for the
through-
credit card?
Yes,
Okay.
because not everybody wants to have to, sign into somebody's subscription model or
Gotcha.
sign up for an app. So that is a requirement for the NEVI stations specifically,
Okay.
but not necessarily for level
So
2.
every
And to be able
charger
to
that's
charge.
being built by the federal funding will have the credit card app?
Yes, so NEVI compliant stations are required to be able to
Okay.
be used via credit card payment only.
All right. Next
Which is an interesting scramble, I think, for some of the hardware manufacturers, because there was only one that we work with that we would always go to when that was a request, because they were the only ones doing it. So now I bet they have a bit of an advantage, because some of the other hardware guys have to kind of figure out how to do that to catch up and be compliant. But the other thing is you have to be able to charge by the kilowatt hour at the station level, according to NEVI, which right now we can't do that. You have to charge by time and basically do a rough equivalent.
So let me ask you, the most unfair thing we do is just charge it for sitting there. Because nobody knows how many kilowatt hours per hour you're going to put in your vehicle. Totally depends on it.
Yeah,
So
you're
to
absolutely
be NEVI compliant, you're telling me we have to change the state law to be able to sell to electric vehicles to have NEVI compliant chargers in Georgia.
Yes, unfortunately, that is actually part of the requirement, and other states have already started to work on that. And for many states, it's just going to be a quick swipe of the pen of just
Might be a
making an
good-
exclusion for electric cars. Or
Might be a
electric
good
vehicle
recommendation for the committee.
Do you remember what the count was? I mean, it's a lot of states that have already gone that direction because of this exact issue.
Any other questions? I see no hands. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
We appreciate it.
Thanks for
Good
having
information.
us.
And thank you for choosing Georgia as your home and for your business. All right, next we will transition to our local governments. The first to speak is on behalf of the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia, Ms. Kathleen Bowen. Looks like the counties have some interest in electric vehicles.
Perfect. And then you can just tap for next.
Good afternoon. I'm Kathleen Bowen. I'm here on behalf of ACCG, which represents all 159 counties in the state. We appreciate being here and having the opportunity to speak because counties do have an interest in the electric vehicle industry and the development of it, and we are paying attention to the conversations that are taking place during the study committee, and we have counties that are learning a lot with you as each presentation comes up. There are a couple things that I did want to bring up. One, as we're converting to electric vehicles, the effects that are going to be on our motor fuel collections, and in particular, the amount of local funding that comes by formula in the code from motor fuel sales. We have counties that own EV charging stations. They are converting their fleets to EVs. We have zoning, permitting, inspection issues that come up, and then economic development. Are there going to be communities that are in a better position for this versus others? Right now, we have things like, I looked at a map where we are right now. There is a distillery in Marion County that gets people to come to it. There's a whiskey trail in Georgia, and are people going to come to these more rural communities if they don't think they're going to be able to get there? So it is an economic development issue for our counties as well. Okay, so the effects on the motor fuel sales tax collections. These are the sales taxes that are currently being applied to motor fuel. You have LOS, SPLOST, eSPLOST, and HOST and MARTA where applicable. I did want to note that T-SPLOST, which are your single county T-SPLOST or your 4 regions that are implementing T-SPLOST, that 1 penny is not applied to motor fuel. So we are funding transportation projects pretty successfully through a sales tax method, but that's 1 penny, right? 1 cent is not being applied to motor fuel. You can look online at the Department of Revenue to see what your local sales tax rate is on motor fuel. Most are at the 3% for the local sales tax piece. The Local Maintenance and Improvement Grant Program, that's LMIG for short, that is the GDOT formula-driven program that gives money to every single county and city, and most of our jurisdictions use this to resurface their roads. It is very important to our local governments, and code states specifically how that should be funded, which is between 10% and 20% of the money that's collected from the state motor fuel tax from the previous year. That is appropriated every year. It is very important to our local governments, let me stress that. So any kind of replacement funds that are being discussed, please know that GDOT does have a component based on motor fuel sales tax collection that goes directly to local governments. And overall, we are very supportive of GDOT's budget because they are funding projects in every single county in this state. Yes, Senator Gooch.
You do recognize you'll be collecting local sales tax on the electricity. Did you bring that up while I was out?
I did not, but yes, there are all of the local sales tax, including T-SPLOST, does apply to electricity. Right. But if I don't know how that's going to compare. I imagine it's going to be less than motor fuel. But it'll apply for
in a county that has a T-SPLOST and an E-LOST and a SPLOST plus a state portion, that'll be 8%.
Correct.
So that would be an 8% sales tax on the energy consumption for the electric cars. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, all the local sales tax would apply to electricity where they don't apply currently to motor fuel.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes. Here's a couple of examples of what counties are doing in this space. Elbert County has 3 EV charging stations at their county government complex and at their courthouse. It's free. They are providing this just as a service to get people downtown. They funded this with county funds, city funds, and just flat out donations. So they are trying to be ahead of the curve and wanted to do this for their citizens. Cobb County has 8 customer-facing EV chargers, but they also have 47 county-only accessible EV charging stations, and they have one of the largest EV fleets in the Southeast. Over the past 20 years, they have been diversifying their fleets, and you'll see there the type of vehicles that they have. They have used county funds. They are also using GFA grants, and we have Ben Cowart here from GFA. I know we talk about the funds GDOT has for this, but GFA in the past has had funding to convert, to give local governments to have these EV charging stations. And Cobb County is also using a GFA grant now to put solar on their fleet building so they can charge those batteries and charge overnight. So that's a current program that GFA, I think, just recently funded. So I encourage you to talk to Ben and to GFA about the programs that they have had or could modify for the future. And then Putnam County, they are in the queue for an electric fire truck. They should be the first, county fire department in the state to have an electric fire truck. And I wrote down the voltage that they're needing for that. Hold on real quick. Okay, they are installing a 480 volt rapid charger to charge that fire truck. And they're pretty proud of this. It's not in state yet, but they're in the queue. It's being built. So Putnam County, right? You probably wouldn't have guessed that would have been the first electric fire truck in the state. And then Troup County, I know it's home to Kia, but General Motors, their local General Motors dealership, is partnering with the county to provide these electric chargers on county infrastructure, on county property. And they are comparing this to how they provide Wi-Fi hotspots for their citizens. So counties are in this space. There are different levels of engagement, and especially for their fleets, they're adding them where it makes sense. So we've already mentioned, I know our previous speaker talked about zoning and permit and inspection. These are the discussion points that our counties are having right now, treating the private residences differently from multifamily or from a public charging station. They're talking about what happens when they're decommissioned, if they're abandoned, the electrical infrastructure capacity and the equipment standards, signage, security, lighting, and operation and maintenance. And I liked this quote. This came from Bullitt County, who's redoing their comprehensive planning. They're redoing their zoning right now and all their permitting. And they're trying to strike that balance with zoning standards to be an EV-friendly, while at the same time not allowing these stations to become a nuisance should they become unsightly, unsafe, or inoperative. So our counties are thinking about this. I wish, Representative Powell, you mentioned an online permitting, streamlined permitting process. They just, the state just passed legislation a couple years ago to do that for alcohol permitting. So we have done it, right? That took Department of Revenue over a year to get that infrastructure in place. So it has been done.
Do you have counties or cities that you're aware of that is requiring the EV charging stations at multifamily complexes that are being built?
Required it? I've not heard that from a county.
Okay.
Yes. That's it. I really just wanted to thank you for letting us be a part of the discussion, and know that as we move forward, please let us be engaged in these conversations because they do impact counties.
With counties becoming more and more sensitive to the motor fuel tax loss, it's going to impact local governments as well as the state. Does the County Commission Association support a road usage charge for all vehicles to include local government-owned vehicles?
We have not taken a position on that.
Okay. Be ready. Questions? Yes, sir.
So just a real quick question. How does the electric fire truck put out the fire if it caught on fire with electric batteries?
Okay, I did ask our fire departments about that. It does take longer to put out an electric vehicle. It does take a fire department longer to put out an electric vehicle, but it can be done.
Let me put my old firefighter hat on.
Yes.
Since John Albers isn't here to answer this question, all fire trucks, all fire engines and tankers carry foam on their trucks for those gas fires, because you're right, water does not extinguish a lot of those. So they have foam. They have a foam chemical they dump into the tank, and it's got a special nozzle that when it sprays, it covers the vehicle with foam, which cuts the oxygen off from the fire, and it extinguishes the fire. I think that's the answer you're going to get about how to put them out, but it is difficult from what I've heard. So.
And your fire departments are doing a lot of public awareness campaigns right now about batteries, not just electric vehicle batteries, but your scooter batteries, your hoverboard batteries. So your fire departments are engaged in this topic as well.
Right. I can't wait to see that fire truck. Any questions over here? All right.
Okay, if there's any additional data you'd like from local governments, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. We look forward to your support of our road usage charge. Okay, our next presenter is going to be the CID. That's Miss Ann Hanlon. Are you here? Where is? Oh, come on up. She's with the Perimeter CID, and also Tracy, is it Stiff? Town Center CID.
Did you guys have a presentation? Okay.
And then after that, we have one more presenter. We'll be finished.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tracy Stife, the Executive Director of the Town Center Community Improvement District. I want to first thank Senator Gooch and Representative Jaspers for inviting us here today, as well as Seth Milliken from the Georgia Transportation Alliance, where we proudly serve on the board. The Town Center CID, for those of you who are not familiar with our location, is in northwestern Cobb County, where Kennesaw State University is located, who has 43,000 students and growing, one of the largest regional universities in the state of Georgia. We have about 35,000 employees that come into Town Center on a daily basis, and they come from all of our surrounding counties. With those numbers, we have been very active in the EV space for quite some time. We in Cobb County have the largest number of registered electric vehicles of any other county besides Fulton, with nearly 6,000 EVs registered, which is nearly 1% of the total vehicles registered in Cobb County. In comparison, if you look at a 20-county area, the average is around 0.83% of registered vehicles that are electric. So when you look at the whole state of Georgia, we have 36.8 million passenger vehicles, and of those, 37,800 are currently EV registered. Those numbers provided by the Atlanta Regional Commission as well as Georgia Power. When you start to look at what that's going to look like over a period of time, the growth is tremendous. When you look at 2025, it's estimated to have 20,000 to 30,000 cars in Cobb County alone, and by 2030, 55,000 to 135,000. No, I don't have any slides. You just get to look at my face. I'll give you all of these numbers, though. I figured you were tired of looking at PowerPoint presentations. Yeah, right. See, just look here. We're good. When you look at those numbers, we have to think what needs to be done now to prepare for the future. We are moving on such a fast trajectory that there are a lot of options of what need to be put into place. And you all have the yeoman's task of figuring that out and making recommendations back to the state. In addition, figuring out what funding opportunities look like from NEVI and the federal government in order to make implementation as efficient as possible. The interesting thing about this for us is that the Atlanta Regional Commission came to Town Center last year and asked us to partner with them and apply for funding through the LCI program to do the first electrification study that the Atlanta Regional Commission has embarked upon. We took on this task and just this morning at our board meeting approved a contract with Atkins Global in order to begin that study. They have international expertise in the areas of electrification, not only just in terms of charging vehicles themselves and the different provider types, but also the different modalities, not just for light use vehicles, but also for buses, charging capabilities underground, and et cetera. When you look at all of the things that are in town center, we already have more than 30 chargers in the Northwest Cobb area. And we have those mainly around residential and retail places. But we also have a Tesla headquarters inside of our district, and we have both DC fast and level 2 chargers. When you think about all of those locations, we also have all of the major makers of charging equipment: Tesla, GE, EnviroSpark, Blink, Volta, EVgo, Leaf, Electrify America, and so on and so forth. So you can imagine how complicated it can be when one system doesn't talk to another, when you have to have different equipment to plug in your Tesla versus your Leaf, and how all those things work together. Being an owner of a very old 2014 Model S Tesla who could not drive it here today, so I made some motor fuel tax available for the state by driving my gas vehicle. Having places to charge along your trip is key. So part of the electrification study that we're embarking upon is plan development and then an implementation plan. Not only to look at where the chargers go, but why they go there and in what phases, and also the P3 investment that is required as part of that process. In terms of a process to select sites for these chargers and prioritize the recommendations for installations, both at the local and the state level. We have a 100-day action plan at the end of the study, which is anticipated to be completed middle of next year. And then we will look at the charging demand of all of these vehicles. They'll be able to evaluate the feasibility down to the block level and the hour of the day of where these stations should go and why. So looking at funding strategy recommendations, but also looking at the policies like Kathleen was speaking to inside of our county as well as regionally, because electric cars don't know county boundary lines. We need to make sure that they work cross-jurisdictionally as well. We've been partnering with Georgia Power, and they've been getting a lot of interest from local businesses in our community on their Make Ready program. So that will be a huge opportunity for Georgia Power to be involved with local businesses to get that EV equipment on the ground most effectively. As we look ahead, we need to be prepared by 2030 that EV sales will make up to 43% of the vehicle sales in our country. So if I commend you all for everything that you're doing now, both into the future. If I and Town Center can be of assistance to you in the process, we're happy to partner. Thank you to Representative Parsons for his local support, and thank you for your time. Any questions? 2030, you've got 55,000 to 130,000 in Cobb County alone. Well, do the math. The math on that, I'm not the quick on the math. So if you figure you've got 6,000 now at 1%, and I mean, it's probably 5%.
I'll get to you in a second, Don. So you said you're going to map out where the charging stations go. What authority do you have as a CID to implement that? Are you going to say no to the permit application process? Are you going to control that?
We would partner through Cobb County on that. Yeah.
And they'll basically yield to your study. And if a C-store wants to put in a charging station that's not on your plan, you'll turn them down?
Yield may be a loose word. I might say that we would collaborate together. Cobb County is a part of the stakeholder committee, and so we'll be working in tandem with them as we do with all of these types of studies to determine implementation and execution.
But you think that if your plan is developed correctly, then only those locations would be applicable or only available for a charging station, no one else?
In a perfect world, yes.
Well, okay. Mr. Parsons. Chairman Parsons.
Thank you for coming all the way down here. Good service from the senator. Thank you for being here. I wanted to ask you a question. I had to miss one of these meetings because of an issue. I don't think this has probably been brought up before. When you went through the companies that are in Cobb County there, I just happened to catch you. You mentioned one called Volta.
Yeah.
And I had a Facebook conversation with somebody one time, and I thought they were wrong, but it turns out they were kind of right. Could you, Volta's different, is that right? Volta's the one that uses advertising, is that correct?
I am not as familiar with their platform at this point in time, but know that they have locations inside of Town Center.
I mean, it's I didn't mean to cut you, but it's my understanding that Volta, because my conversation with this person online was, they said you can get charging for free. I said, well, no, they can't get it for free. And it really isn't free, but Volta, my understanding is they will offer you like so many minutes free while you watch their advertising on the screen. And then to get more, you have to pay something, but you still have to watch advertising. And the longer you charge, the more you pay, but it's offset by the amount of advertising that you watch.
Fascinating. Yeah, I think that there are so many companies that are online or coming online. We're all learning in this together. And it seems that a lot of the technology is changing by the time we kind of get up to speed. So we're at the very beginning, like I said, of the EV study process.
Well, I appreciate it. But when you mentioned that, and that Volta came to my mind, and I looked it up on there, and that's what it is. And I just think that's something probably the committee may not have heard about that particular concept. So, but thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Representative Parsons.
Any other questions? You've got that look. All right.
Great.
I see none. Thank you.
I'll
Ann,
turn
are
it
you
over
up
to Ann.
next? Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Like Tracy, I wanted to thank Chairman Gooch for the invitation today, and Chairman Jaspers, and of course Seth Milliken. I'm also serving on the board of the GTA, and we're really, really happy and thankful that the committee has decided to give the CID some space to address you this afternoon. So thank you for that. I also realize I'm one of the last things on the agenda, so I'm going to be quick because everybody's got to get home. My name is Ann Hanlon, and I'm the Executive Director of the Perimeter Community Improvement Districts. We are the largest CID in the state of Georgia by revenue. We were founded in 1999, and we're located at the north end of DeKalb and Fulton counties. So as a little bit of a point of introduction, like Tracy and like all the CIDs in the state, we serve the commercial property owners. So those are our constituents. That's who we report to. The Perimeter CID is home to the largest concentration of Class A office space in the southeastern U.S. So we're home to a lot of corporations that all of you have heard of: Cox, UPS, State Farm, Mercedes-Benz, Insight Global, Intercontinental Hotels Group, Perimeter Mall, which is one of the largest regional malls in the state. Of course, Pill Hill, which if you're from Metro Atlanta, you're familiar with Northside Hospital, St. Joseph's. We have more babies born in the Perimeter CID per day than anywhere else in the U.S. So we have a lot of challenges that are happening. In addition, one of the largest transportation projects that's happening in the state at the 285 and Georgia 400 interchange is happening within our district. So we really sort of run the gamut with commercial interest, corporate interest, healthcare, and of course our focus on transportation funding. So I really just wanted to hit 3 quick points today. I also did not bring any slides, but I wanted to make a plea to you all to think about EV in terms of economic development, redevelopment of existing suburban office districts, and of course, like so many others have done, to try to keep your focus on the funding aspect too. In Perimeter, if you've been to the Perimeter area around Perimeter Mall, Our area was developed in the late 80s, early 90s, and so we're now sort of the focus of a big wave of redevelopment. Post-COVID, our big focus is to try to get people back in the office, and believe it or not, one of the amenities that people are asking for when they come back is EV charging stations. So we have worked at the CID, we have worked through our master plan with 15 of our large owners in the CID to get EV charging equipment installed. Also, on the economic development front, as we have worked with the State Department of Economic Development on landing a lot of big projects in our area, most notably Mercedes-Benz, State Farm, Carvana, the biggest office lease in all of Metro Atlanta, was in Perimeter last year in 2021, and that was Carvana. They did a sublease on some space in the State Farm building. And if you've been doing economic development for a long time, like all of you have, it used to be the questions that got asked are, what about the local school system, or the local infrastructure, or the water infrastructure. EV is on the list now. The sophistication level of all of these companies is such that their executives, their employees, people are demanding this. So it's more than just an amenity that's offered for free. It's something that executives are using to make decisions for economic development on where they locate. And one of the reasons that the Perimeter area has been so successful is because we do have that infrastructure in place. Mercedes-Benz relocated from Montvale, New Jersey. They came to the Perimeter area. So these are Zillow is another one that's relocated to our area recently, and this is a question that is first on the list when they're having those economic development meetings with the local city government or with the state. So I just wanted to make sure that you understand that is really, really high on the list of things that the decision makers are asking. One of the things I mentioned before was redevelopment.
Maybe an obvious question, but why do you think it's that important to them? About the EVs. Why are the EVs so important to those prospects?
I really think it's because sheer volume. So many of their employees have EVs now, and it's something that because they're coming from such long commutes. We are able to track commute times. Like when people are coming to work in Perimeter, they're coming from Cobb County, Gwinnett County, Henry County, Rockdale County. So they need it. By the time they get there, they need to charge up so they can get home.
And I'm not trying to argue with you, but if gasoline were at $2 a gallon and the price of a gasoline F-150 truck is $20,000 to $30,000 cheaper than the F-150 Lightning, or Lightning, depending on where you're from, how do they justify that extra expense? And why would they make that such an interest? Why would they make that such a priority for their decision making?
My assumption is that that's something that their employees are asking for. I really don't know.
Are we talking about blue collar? Are you talking about blue collar employees or executives?
Would be not blue collar employees.
Okay.
More professional services.
All right. Thank you.
We have a lot of tech jobs.
I knew you was going to strike a nerve with Randy. We'll say again. So the decision's not about the. Is it ideology? Okay. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
because I was
I'm having a hard time hearing, but I think you mentioned something about the environment. A lot of corporations have these green strategies,
right.
Green infrastructure strategies. My assumption is that EV is probably one of the things on the checklist that they have to check off. Like LEED certified, a lot of our companies have to be in a LEED certified building, for example.
Well, and Senator Ginn was he's still the economic development director in his hometown. I used to be. In the years that I was involved as a local government guy, electric vehicles have never been an issue out in the rural areas. It may be in Atlanta, I'm not disputing that, but they're more concerned about the cost of energy and the cost of gasoline, and where I relate with them. So that's just curious why they thought that was such a big priority, but you're saying it's for their executive workforce. Okay. Gotcha. All right, thank you. Didn't mean to drag this out.
No, those are good questions. And I mean, I think it illustrates sort of part of the change of what we're seeing companies ask for now. And it's just, it is different than it was even, to me, COVID is a good measuring stick, you know, because what people are asking for now is a lot different than I thought that they asked for a couple years ago. And one of the things that our companies are they're struggling to get people to come back to the office. So we're a business district. You know, I can't speak for the residential community, but we're a business district. And what we hear from the executives at these big companies is they're trying to do everything that they can possible to get their employees to come back. Perimeter Mall is talking about a big redevelopment, and one of the things that they've taught me about is dwell time. You know, using EV as a previous person mentioned that if it is offered as an amenity and it's free, they're not trying to make the money off of the electricity itself, but they want you to dwell. You know, they want you to come in and have a cup of coffee and shop and walk around and sort of the experience of it all. So that's what I hear more of when they're having some of those economic development and rezoning conversations.
Are you finished?
I can be.
No. when you pause, I don't know if you were looking for a question or. I do have a question about your retailers in general, and I should have asked this earlier. So if we're not getting some of these NEVI chargers in like the 400 corridor, because there's already chargers in place. A lot of those chargers are located in private properties like hotels, shopping centers, wherever. Are they going to get to a point at someday when there are enough enough electric cars on the road to where people would drive off of the highway, off of Georgia 400, for example, into a private parking lot for the only purpose of charging their car and then leaving, not with the intention of becoming a customer in that shopping center? At some point, the private property owners are going to say, these charging stations are for our customers only. If you're not coming in to shop at our store, then please don't stop here for your electricity charge. Is that a fair question?
Yeah, I can absolutely imagine a situation where that would happen, you know, because we keep using the word amenity, right? In our district, it's very much touted as this infrastructure is an amenity for our tenants or our shoppers, our users, if you're staying here.
So the question, I guess, follow-up is, what do we do about those voids now with the plan that DOT submitted if we're not going to put charging stations in those corridors because there were apparently some chargers there? So how do we go back and backfill? You're going to rely on the private sector, I guess, to do that at some point. Is that right?
I would imagine that those.
Assuming the federal money's gone next year, or, 2 years, 3 years from now. So.
In my view, it's going to become a competitive disadvantage if a private sector development doesn't have it. Right. If they're competing for where our district is, they're competing for tenants, hotel guests, shoppers or whatever. Okay. And so if you don't have it, you're going to definitely be at a disadvantage because you're not going to get the people coming. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
It does. And my thought was at some point there becomes some liability issues as well. If people are driving in off the street just to charge, they have spills, falls, accidents, crime issues. Who does the property owner then become liable for those crimes? We've seen it in our discussions on tort reform in the past. So those private property owners start to worry about the insurance companies and some of the lawsuits. What do you think, Mr. Counselor? You're listening. So that was, I'm finished. I'm not going to ask you to answer that, but that's just something that keeps coming up in my process, my thought process. So.
Yeah, and I can understand that. Those are very difficult questions to think through. Space is also at such a premium. I know in our district, real estate is very expensive. Every square foot is wildly expensive. So a lot of the things that we talk to our companies about is it worth it, you know? Is taking away one parking space or two parking spaces or three, is that even worth it? Because real estate is at such a premium. You know, we're not a district where there's the space to build like a big farm, a big charging farm, or 10 spaces at a time, even 5 spaces at a time. So it's a real estate question as much as it is anything else. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
information. We appreciate it. She's not going to be here. We are not going to hear from Carolyn Simons today from ART, but that will be next week at GDOT. So our last presenter today is Textron Industries by Brandon Haddock.
There's no flame there's no foam gonna.
There you are, sir. Just tap the arrow to go
What
now.
happens is those batteries start getting real hot. They start creating heat. And they have to put a ton of water on them to keep.
Thank you, everybody.
Until the charge runs out. Does that make sense?
I want to thank Chairman Gooch and Chairman Jaspers for the opportunity to speak to the committee today, and I want to thank the committee for its hard work in preparing our state for an EV future. I'm Brandon Haddock. I'm the Director of Communications for Textron Specialized Vehicles based in Augusta. And I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes today about electrification in the off-highway space and what we're doing to electrify our product lines outside of on-road usage. I'm aware of my place on the agenda, so I'm going to be brief and get everybody out of here on time, but appreciate the opportunity to speak with you for a few minutes today. A little bit about us. We were founded in Augusta, Georgia in 1954. We trace our roots to the founding of the E-Z-GO Golf Car Company. I won't be so bold as to say we're the first EV manufacturer in Georgia, but I haven't found another one. So the very first vehicle we built was an electric vehicle. The first E-Z-GO Golf Car was actually powered by Army surplus engines that were designed to power B-17 wing flaps in World War II. So we've been building electric vehicles since day one. We were acquired by Textron, which is a Fortune 500 multi-industry company, in 1960. And today our business has expanded to employ over 3,000 people worldwide. And our product lines extend well beyond golf cars, as you'll see on this slide. Today we make everything from E-Z-GO golf cars, Arctic Cat side-by-sides, ATVs, and snowmobiles, Jacobson professional turf care equipment, Cushman commercial utility vehicles, and a particular product line we'll talk a little bit more about today are ground support equipment for aviation, which is an area that is rapidly electrifying. A little bit about our footprint in Georgia, just to give you some background. We are headquartered in Augusta. We also have an operation in Cartersville. Between Augusta and Cartersville, we employ about 1,800 people, about 1,500 in Augusta, and a little over 350 in Cartersville. The Cartersville facility is new. It began operations earlier this year, and it is where we manufacture our aviation ground support equipment. These are our company headquarters, so these are not just manufacturing facilities. This is where our executives sit. We have folks across all the business functions: engineers, sales, financiers, marketeers, accountants, lawyers, and the like. So these are, as I said, these are the headquarters for our company and for our businesses. You know, electrification really is not just about golf cars anymore. Obviously, we began over 60 years ago building electric golf cars, but today our customers across all our industries are seeking electric vehicles for reasons that you're well aware of. Our customers, both commercially and in the consumer side, are looking to reduce their carbon footprint. They have a preference for EV technology, and EV technology has also advanced to the point where electric vehicles are more affordable and easier to maintain, service, and operate. We have a strategic emphasis to electrify across all of our product lines. We have a dedicated electrification team with engineers and designers across all of our sites to work to electrify our products and leverage the 6 decades of electric vehicle design expertise that we have in electrifying our products. This is a key point of emphasis for us strategically for our company moving forward because it's what our customers are asking us to do. I want to speak specifically for a few minutes about ground support equipment in this particular business. This is a sector that is electrifying rapidly. The commercial air travel and air cargo industries are quickly electrifying their ground operations. Those carriers, be they commercial airlines or air cargo companies, are looking to streamline operations, reduce their carbon footprint, and one of the easiest areas for them to do so is through the electrification of their ground support equipment fleets. To that end, we are investing heavily to electrify our product lines and ground support equipment. We've entered a relationship with General Motors as well as a company called Powertrain Control Solutions to integrate GM's Ultium lithium technology into our ground support equipment products. In fact, just last month, we introduced the first new product under that agreement, which is our Tug Endurance baggage and cargo tractor, which you see in the top left there. That tractor is powered by GM's lithium battery technology, which enables it to use the same charging technology and charging infrastructure, automotive charging infrastructure that anyone would use to charge an electric automobile, a level 2 or level 3 automotive charger. It can get the job done. It can charge very quickly. It's more energy efficient to use. So we're very excited to introduce that product as the first new product under that agreement with General Motors. We're also working to we've also introduced a couple of other recent new lithium-powered electric vehicles in the ground support equipment space. Our Tug Alpha 1 aircraft pushback, which is a narrow-body aircraft pushback. It's designed to move planes like the Boeing 737 MAX or the Airbus A321 to and from the gate, as well as our Tug 660 lithium belt loader, which is used to load cargo from a baggage and cargo tractor into the belly of an airplane, are both recent introductions within the last 2 years to our GSE product line. So this is an area that we are investing very heavily in. Our customers are asking us to move very rapidly in this space, and I do think that that has some implications for infrastructure beyond the highways. The needs for EV infrastructure won't stop where the road stops. There's going to be a need for EV infrastructure, charging infrastructure, and the like at our airports, at our air cargo terminals, and in our facilities, perhaps even our ports moving forward is something that we as a state and as an industry need to be aware of and working with our customers to solve. Talk just for a minute about some of our other product lines. We introduced our EasyGo Elite series of vehicles in 2017. This basically takes the old flooded lead acid battery technology that was traditionally used in golf cars and personal transportation vehicles and replaces it with Samsung SDI lithium battery technology. So you significantly reduce the weight of the vehicle, you significantly improve the energy efficiency of the vehicle. The vehicle no longer requires, the battery systems of the vehicle are zero maintenance. If you're familiar with traditional lead acid battery technology, those batteries had to be kept maintained, they had to be watered, battery terminals had to be cleaned. If you didn't perform that maintenance regularly and properly, the battery's life would be significantly shortened. It could be a very messy process. Our lithium technology eliminates the need for all that. In fact, we cover the battery system. Not only do we not require our customers to service the batteries, we don't want our customers to service the batteries. They don't have to. They're significantly more energy efficient than the lead acid battery technology as well, charge much more quickly, and are just a much and have a significantly longer lifespan in use than traditional lead-acid battery technologies. We manufacture tens of thousands of these vehicles annually at our facility in Augusta. We were the first manufacturer in the golf car industry to introduce a lithium-powered vehicle that we could offer affordably at fleet scale to a commercial operation, and so we have seen the business take off very quickly. As a matter of fact, earlier this year we announced that we are significantly reducing the use of lead-acid battery technologies across all of our product lines. We really only put lead-acid batteries in a handful of our products now. The vast majority of the vehicles we build are now powered by lithium technologies. And we're extending the use of this technologies into some adjacent products. So our Cushman commercial utility vehicles, like you see there, managing the ball field, our Jacobson professional turf equipment, which are the large mowers that are used to maintain golf courses, municipal complexes, sports complexes, and other large turf sites, and our EasyGo consumer products. In fact, that product there we just introduced last year. It's called the EasyGo Liberty. Because of the smaller size of footprint of a lithium battery pack compared to traditional lead-acid technology, we're able to fit 4 passengers facing forward, facing in the same direction in a short wheelbase vehicle, which was not something that was really feasible using earlier technologies. You had to go to a larger stretch application product. So we're really changing the way we design vehicles as a result of the adoption of lithium technology, and that leads to another point that I'd like to make is we're seeing our talent needs evolve and grow as the shift to new EV technologies takes place. We're going to need obviously more electrical engineers, more industrial designers, more people with expertise in EV supply chain management and procurement. And so these are areas that we want to work with our state's universities, colleges, and the technical college systems to make sure that we're preparing the next generation of the workforce for an EV future and make sure that we have enough people in that talent pipeline to serve not only our needs, but the needs of the greater state and the burgeoning EV industry here in our state. So, as I said, I wanted to keep it very brief, but I did want to spend just a few minutes to talk to you about commercial applications of EVs and what's happening in the EV space outside of in the off-highway area. And so I'll be happy to entertain any questions that you might have at this time.
Thank you. The lead-acid batteries, at the end of life, I've taken it out of my car, my golf cart, whatever. I carry it to Napa, Walmart. There's a core exchange, I think $15 fee I get for returning that battery. The lithium-ion battery, is there a same thing on that, or there's no incentive for me to take that lithium battery to exchange it?
There's currently not a mechanism to allow the individual consumer to exchange the lithium battery for a new core, as you said. Certainly, the recycling and sustainability of lithium battery technology is important, and that's something that we're focused on. The life cycle in general of a lithium battery is significantly longer than a lead-acid battery. So they don't require replacement as often as lead-acid batteries. They will last significantly longer under most applications. And so, but we do need to make sure that we are prepared and we have the infrastructure in place to recycle that technology as those batteries
And I think that's what we need to address, end the life of these batteries. What do we do with them if nobody's recycling them? Yeah. What do we do?
Yeah. And that is something that we need to obviously discuss as a state, and nationally, that's an infrastructure need.
Anyone else? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today.
All right. Well, I think we're approaching the end of the day. Couple questions or comments. Members, if you recall, our last meeting is going to be next week. It's going to be Wednesday. That'll be November 2nd. And we're going to meet at the DOT headquarters there in downtown Atlanta on the 4th floor, which is where the board meeting is. They have every month. It's a big room, and we're going to have a full day of discussion. Other presenters will be there, but toward the end of the day, we want to talk about what we've learned through this process. And so right now, I'd just like for you to, if you have something that you'd like to hear more about next Tuesday or next Wednesday, let us know now. Or if you have questions about what we've heard, if you want to have follow-up with any of those presenters, let us know as well. We can arrange for that. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
When we try to put all this information together, and we know that the electric vehicles don't pay motor fuel tax.
Speak into that microphone if you don't mind, so we can get it on the. It's on. We're being broadcast on the internet.
Where are we going to be? Is anybody going to come to us from revenue and talk about what they feel the percentage of EVs will be versus what we're bringing in as far as revenue or on motor fuel tax?
We have made some preliminary calculations on what that cost is per mile, and we're looking at how do we approach it. And that's why we keep asking these same questions about cars that are charged in a garage versus out on the road at a public charging station. How do we collect the loss of motor fuel? And that's something that I don't think anyone's really has answered yet completely. There's a lot of tests being done. There's some pilot projects that are being conducted around the country. I think GDOT is looking to get into one of those pilot projects at the first of the year, and that may be a recommendation that we make, is that we participate in that pilot project on a select number of cars, just to collect data and try to figure out how to logistically implement that policy and collect it. How do counties and cities get their share? So that's an important part of this study committee, and one of the things that we've tried to dwell on as we've gone through it over the summer and the fall. So good question.
The reason I asked, we did the $5. The last time we did a massive transportation move.
Right.
$5 came out of a hotel.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding, Florida gets money from various sources in their transportation. They get money off of real estate sales, all of those kinds of things. That's the reason they're able to fast forward or fast fund projects and then just wait to get the money from the Fed. So sure. What I'm questioning is whether or not we are going to be looking at all of those scenarios to try to make sure that we don't ever have to come back and redo our transportation department like we had to do that massive, that big thing that time.
House Bill 170 addressed a lot of those concerns, and you're right. The $5 per night hotel fee was one way to capture a lot of that out-of-state money. Gas tax alone wasn't doing it, so we added those other fees. However, on electric cars and trucks, I think it's important that they pay their fair share on the usage of the roads, just like combustible engines. That's one senator talking. You've been in the process a long time. You know how this works. So there may be, literally, there could be dozens of bills in the future, not necessarily next year. I don't know that we have to figure all of this out before January. But I think figuring out a way to capture everyone who uses the road should pay their fair share. No one, I think, has a strong argument against that. Would you agree? So we just got to keep working on it. Any other thoughts before next Wednesday? There will be an email sent out to each of you. We're being invited to tour the Cisco facility down in College Park. That'll take place Tuesday afternoon. I think it'll be 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then followed by dinner afterwards, because we'll be starting on Wednesday at 9 a.m. We're going to start early Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. and work through the day. They'll take a break for lunch, and then we'll try to come up with some recommendations and some discussion that we'll put together a report, and then later in the month of November we will finalize that report and approve it, and it'll be turned in by December 1st. So got a lot of holidays and elections and everything else going on in that time frame too. So everybody okay with that schedule? Any questions or comments? Any public comments before we dismiss? All right, well, if not, we'll see you all November 2nd, week from Wednesday.